Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort, the self-proclaimed Dark Lord, was dead. Dead. Not the disembodied, yet to be reborn in a very dark, magic, creepy way, but in the real, final, no more Horcruxes kind of dead. With Tom's death came the end to the Second Wizarding War, that war that had consumed Harry Potter's years in the magical world. Any surviving Death Eaters had been rounded up, the magical world was at peace once more, and people happier without the threat of death or destruction hanging over their heads. The masses celebrated and mourned. Harry Potter, aka the boy who lived, recently declared savior of the wizarding world. Didn't celebrate. Oh sure, Harry was glad the war was over. But too many good people died during the war, people that Harry cared about, and some he even loved. What he mostly felt was restlessness. All his life, Harry felt as if he had been led by the prophecy, that his only purpose had been the destruction of Voldemort. Harry hadn't truly expected to accomplish that task, let alone survive it. Only Harry had done both, killed Tom and lived to tell the tale, and now that part of his life was over. At first, Harry didn't know what he'd do next. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how forgiving he felt that day, some folks told Harry what they wanted him to do. Kingsley Shacklebolt, the new Minister of Magic, wanted Harry to join the ministry and give the wizarding community peace of mind. The general public of the wizarding world, according to the media, wanted Harry to become an Auror, find any escaped Death Eater, and keep them safe. Vernon Dursley, Harry's whale of an uncle, wanted Harry to never acknowledge his family again. Hermione Granger, best friend and sister in all ways that mattered, wanted to go back to school and believed Harry and Ron should join her. Harry had no idea what position he could possibly fill within the ministry that would guarantee the public peace of mind, nor did he want to look too closely at that prospect. While Harry had wanted to be an Auror since the day he learned of them, the idea no longer held a shine for him. Harry wasn't a peacekeeper, he was a teenager. Harry wasn't ready to grow up and be some beacon of peace. Besides, he had been doing that for the past 17 years, and Harry deserved a break, didn't he? As for Vernon Dursley, Harry was more than happy to oblige. Harry hadn't spoken to any of the Dursleys since they all moved out of their house on Privet Drive right before Harry's 17th birthday, and the thought of seeking them out intentionally was absolutely ludicrous. From that short list of folks telling Harry what to do, Hermione was the only one that succeeded. Hermione had talked Harry into retaking their 7th year of schooling. Harry had briefly thought to argue that a person couldn't possibly retake something they hadn't taken in the first place, but the witch was determined, and Harry didn't have anything better to do anyway. It was Tuesday, September 1st, and the train sped its way across the countryside to deliver the students to Hogsmeade Station. Laughter and running children could be heard in the hall. The compartment Harry sat in had a soft, steady buzz of conversation going, but nothing too hectic. Harry rested his forehead against the window pane. The glass felt cool against his heated skin. When the door to the compartment opened again, Harry mentally braced himself. It was still too early for Malfoy and his cronies to make their traditional visit. Then again, Malfoy's usual sidekicks weren't coming back to retake their last year at school. Some Slytherins that survived the war chose to stay away from Hogwarts. Aside from the annual anticipated visit, there had also been many well-wishers dropping by that year, with the occasional gossiping, giggling girl who not so subtly asked questions about him, and Ginny breaking up while batting their eyes at Harry. Girls. With a long-suffering sigh, Harry opened his eyes and turned to see who had entered the compartment. She sat silently, patiently beside him, and when he gave her a small smile of relief, she finally spoke. "Hello, Harry Potter." Harry relaxed into his seat when he greeted back, "Hello, Luna Lovegood." Luna watched Harry for a silent moment. Harry frowned when he noticed how out of character Luna appeared. In previous years, the young wife of a girl had worn colorful dresses, when not in her school uniform, with a butterbeer cork necklace and radish earrings. Luna usually had a far-off look in her eyes and spoke with a lilting, sing-song voice about nonsensical things that left the listener confused and wondering if they should believe anything the girl said. unless they knew Luna. Then they'd listen carefully and heed her advice. Luna was simply everything one would expect from a Lovegood, brilliant, open-minded, often seen with a vacant or far-off look, and eccentric in every aspect of the word, except she didn't fit that expectation at that moment. Luna looked perfectly poised, excited, a touch anxious, and surprisingly sad. Luna's hair appeared lighter than her usual honey blonde. Her dress was long and flowing, made of a gauzy material that was a simple white rather than blindingly colorful. Her radish earrings and butterbeer cork necklace were missing, replaced with only an intricate silver ring on her index finger. When she spoke, it was with an air of finality instead of whimsy. "It's nearly time." Time for what?" Harry asked. He glanced out the window and noted that it was barely getting dark. Harry brought his attention back to his friend, stating, "I'm sure we have another hour at least before we reach Hogsmeade." "Yes, we do. And then I will be going home." Luna smiled sweetly. "I will miss you, Melon." "I don't understand," Harry said, frowning. "Why go all the way to London to ride a train to Scotland, just so you can go back to St. Ottery Catch?" Her sudden burst of laughter surprised them both and cut across his words, no one else looking over at the lilting sound. Luna gently corrected him. "It's Ottery St. Catchpole. Only that's not the home I'm referring to. Father and I are going back to Middle-earth, where we belong. As to why I'm on the train, Father encouraged me to come aboard to say my farewells. It's what's taken me so long to get to you. You're my last friend to visit with." "Middle-earth?" "Middle-earth," Luna again corrected Harry gently. All humor slowly left the girl, and she spoke wistfully. "Middle-earth is where my people have lived for over 1,000 years. We dwell in the Golden Wood below the misty mountains in Lothlorien. Dark times have befallen the land. The time of the elves is coming to an end." Harry shook his head, taking it all in, but not understanding a word. Luna leaned closer, nudging Harry playfully by bumping shoulders with him. "It will be all right. The Parian has the ring." Harry perked at that word, as it triggered a long-ago memory. Parian! He had heard that word before. Luna had said that once, and at the time it made absolutely no sense to him. It happened some time ago. Luna and he had been talking when she had suddenly stopped speaking and gasped in shock. Her demeanor had changed drastically from calm and dreamy to focused and worried. Luna's words came to Harry as he spoke them back to her. "The Parian fights the call of the dark." A beautiful smile brightened Luna's features as she nodded. "Yes, Bilbo continues his fight." "This isn't one of your tall tales with a hidden moral." Harry watched her closely and shook his head along with her. "This is real." "Yes, it is very real," Luna stated, quite matter-of-factly. Harry turned his attention to the other occupants in the compartment for their reactions to what was being said, and noted for the first time since the beginning of their conversation that not one of their friends was paying any attention to them. They were still talking, some more animatedly than others, but Harry couldn't hear a word of it. It was as if Harry and Luna weren't even in the same compartment with them. Luna slipped her small hand into Harry's. "I will miss you most of all." Harry snorted in amusement and met Luna's pale blue gaze. "Why? You'll miss the crazy adventures that nearly get us killed." "No, silly!" Luna chuckled softly. "There will be plenty of adventures to be had in Middle-earth. You, Harry Potter, are my friend." She looked past him at the darkening skies beyond the window pane. "I was to ask you to accompany us. Us, you and your father, to Middle-earth." Harry sat up straight and peered at her. "Why?" "There is a—" "Please, don't say prophecy," Harry interrupted, practically begging. Luna didn't speak. Instead, she bit her bottom lip and looked down at their clasped hands. Harry groaned. "Of course there is." "Fine, tell me." Luna didn't hesitate and spoke to their hands without meeting Harry's eyes. "When the one calls, the light will be brought forth and guide him, destroying that which cannot be destroyed. Through the light, the darkness will fall and bring an end to the war of wars." Not very poetic. "It sounds better in Elvish," Luna said in passing as she finally met his gaze. "It loses something in the translation." Harry gave her a tired smile, dragged his attention back to the window, and laid his forehead against the cold pane. Luna didn't press Harry for an answer. She simply held his hand in silent moral support. It wasn't until the train slowed into Hogsmeade station that Harry finally spoke. But it wasn't to Luna. "Hermione?" The brunette jumped at the sound of Harry's voice. Everyone, save for Luna, had apparently forgotten that Harry was in the compartment with them. One by one, their friends had been exiting the train to get into a waiting carriage, and from there they'd go to the castle. Hermione stood there, frowning in confusion because Harry and Luna weren't standing, nor were they dressed in their school uniform. They hadn't moved, and what amused Harry, Hermione couldn't seem to tear her eyes away from their clasped hands. Hermione finally responded, "Yes." "Do you have your beaded bag with you?" Hermione blushed. Is it still packed? With the books, the tent, everything?" Well, Hermione met his gaze and sheepishly nodded. "Yes. Mind if I borrow it?" Without asking why, Hermione dug into her school bag and pulled out her worn-out red beaded bag. It had gotten them through many tough times during their year on the run. Harry accepted the bag with a thanks. He set the bag in his lap and frowned. "I don't know when I can bring this back." The "if I can" was left unspoken, but must have been plain in his expression. Still, Hermione didn't ask why, but she did ask, "You'll be safe?" "I'll be with Luna." Hermione's eyes swept over to their blonde friend. "We're not going this time?" There was no need to ask who the we Hermione was referring to. The trio had gone through quite a bit over the past 7 years, and they did so together. Harry responded before Luna could. "Not this time. You need to go back to school. Graduate. Make this world of ours a better place." A single tear dared to fall, but Hermione stood strong and nodded. Hermione took a bracing breath and told her best friend something she had been meaning to for quite some time. That was possibly her last chance. "I love you, Harry." Harry moved. Then, in one fluid movement, he stood, dropping the beaded bag onto the seat he had just vacated, and hugged his best friend. "I love you, Hermione, my sister in all but blood. Take care of everyone. It's your turn to shine." Hermione swiped at her tears when Harry released her from his embrace. She then latched on to Luna to embrace the blonde just as tightly as she had Harry. Hermione whispered to Luna, "Please take care of him." "I will do what I can," Luna agreed. "That's all I can ask," Hermione said with a half laugh, half sob, and then ran from the compartment, not looking back. Harry pulled down his trunk from the overhead rack and shrunk it down before dropping it, with the red beaded bag into his pocket. The two friends left the train in silence and walked from the station into the Forbidden Forest. When they finally came to a stop, it was at the same clearing where Harry had faced Voldemort in order to die. That was where they found Luna's father. The man twirled his wand in his hand, and Harry stood in stunned silence. Luna's father looked markedly different than the last time Harry had seen him. For one thing, the man no longer had the haunted, vacant look of a Lovegood that had his only daughter stolen. The blond man sighed longingly. "I rather enjoyed having magic. Pity we cannot take it with us." "Mr. Lovegood?" Luna's father stopped twirling the wand and motioned the boy forward. "Splendid. I see you have decided to join us." "Father, may I properly present Harry Potter, head of the ancient and noble House of Black, head of the noble House of Potter, the boy who lived, the chosen one, undesirable number one, vanquisher of Dark Lord Voldemort, and the master of death," said boy, squirmed at the numerous titles but didn't look away from the man before him. Harry wasn't sure he could. The man was tall, regal, and, more importantly, Mr. Lovegood had pointed ears. Pointed ears. Harry blinked. "Wait, what? Master of Death?" "I did warn you," Luna's father reminded him. "When you came to me asking about the Deathly Hallows, I told you then that together they make one the Master of Death." "That's why they kept coming back to me," Harry said, more to himself than to the others. "You tried to destroy them, throw them away, but they would return, whole and unblemished." "I did. I finally gave up and accepted them." Harry sighed. "So, Master of Death. That doesn't sound ominous." "It isn't as bad as you think," Mr. Lovegood tried to reassure the young man. "Harry, there's more," Luna continued before Harry could ask for clarification. "This is my father, Celeborn, Lord of Lothlorien, Lord of the Galadriel, Lord of the Golden Wood, Lord of East Lorien, Prince of Doriath." Celeborn gave a regal nod of his head, and Harry blinked before he gave a small, awkward bow. But Luna wasn't done with the introductions. "Before we go, I need you to understand, my true name is not Luna. I am Linovel, Maiden of Lothlorien, Maiden of the Galadriel, Maiden of the Golden Wood." And with that, she brushed her hair behind her ear. Harry stared, gaped. Really? Luna, Linovel, whatever her name was, she too had pointed ears. Harry couldn't resist his curiosity and raised a finger to trace along the outer edge of her pointed ear. Luna just smiled and took his hand in hers before he could make contact, snapping his attention away from her ears and back to the girl. Reality came into focus for Harry, and he blushed at what he was about to do. Harry mumbled an embarrassed apology. Luna didn't reprimand Harry, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. Father isn't Xenophilius Lovegood. The entire Lovegood family had perished in the magical accident created by Pandora Lovegood's research shortly before we arrived, allowing Father and I to stand in for them. It was a fortuitous tragedy. Luna still held Harry's hand and gave it a squeeze. We will be going to Lothlorien. Mother is expecting us. Your mother? Harry blinked, pulling his trance-like stare from Luna's ears once and for all, and frowned. I thought you said your mother was dead. While Pandora Lovegood is dead, I told you that my mother was in a place I could not go yet. Luna reminded him. Semantics, perhaps, but it is, at the very least, the truth. It is time for us to return. Will you still come with us? Harry hesitated, his mind spinning, trying to take all of the information in when a single point stood out above the rest. Your father said we can't take our magic with us. I don't see how I'll be of much use to you without it. Ha, said Celeborn. I did say that, but he held up a finger to stress his point. You, Mr. Potter, are a true wizard. Where we are not, while we are in your world, we took the form of humans and were granted magic to blend in with others in your world. But when we return to Middle-earth, here Celeborn gestured to his ears, it will be as our true selves. Harry cocked his head, squinted his eyes, and asked, So, about that one. The prophecy was a bit vague. I'm guessing Middle-earth has its own version of a Dark Lord. Of course, Celeborn said, as if it were obvious. At that declaration, Harry took a shaky breath and repeated, Of course! Luna waved off her father and focused on her friend. I told you the prophecy, Harry. She waited until Harry nodded before continuing. Our world is much different than this one. More primitive by Muggle standards, yet rich with culture and traditions. That life, all life in Middle-earth is threatened. Sauron has a single Horcrux. A ring. The One Ring. It has been found and must be destroyed. Harry appeared to have calmed, and Luna stepped closer. Will you come with us? Of course I will, Harry acquiesced. I told you I would. Luna smiled at him, and Harry gave her an awkward shrug. After all, I have another prophecy to fulfill. Harry hated magical travel, with only one exception, flying, be it on a broom, hippogriff, or the Strel. And that was because Harry felt free when he was flying, like he could soar to the heavens and back, or never to return again. When he was flying, Harry was in charge of his own fate. All other forms were worse than the next. For example, worse than apparition was using the flu network. Worse than using the flu network was riding on the night bus. Worse than riding the night bus was taking a port key, and worse than a port key was side-along apparition. Or at least, that was Harry's opinion on the matter. With that in mind, it was perfectly understandable that Harry was wary about magically traveling to Middle-earth. They weren't simply traveling to another location within the UK. They weren't even traveling within the same world. They were going to another realm entirely. Thankfully, traveling to Middle-earth was an experience like nothing Harry had previously experienced. The entire trip had been a smooth transition from one realm to the other in a flash of all-encompassing golden light. The light didn't make him feel as if he were being squeezed into a tube. It didn't make him dizzy or cover him in soot. It didn't toss him back and forth like a rag doll. It didn't pull from his navel to sweep him off his feet and drop him unceremoniously on his arse. Instead, Harry had felt a comforting warmth surrounding him like a fluffy blanket before it gently released him in the new world. The light had been so heartening that Harry was nearly sorry it had ended, especially once he was released from the golden light. Harry's knees buckled, and he dropped to the ground with a groan. What had once felt like a warm, almost loving embrace soon left the team feeling decidedly bereft, aching, and overheated to the point of internally burning. Harry curled into a fetal position and shook uncontrollably. His body felt as if it was being torn apart, piece by piece, before being set on fire. Luna was quickly kneeling at his side and crying out to her friend, Harry, there was work to be done. The One had resurfaced after an era of hiding, and it was the Nazgoul who were expected to retrieve it. The hunt continued without success. The ringwraiths broke into two parties, searching for the wretched creature. They allowed to escape, they traveled from town to town, seeking any who had seen or heard of Gollum. No answers were forthcoming. Ermerazor, Duor, G. Indor, and Akurahel were riding west along the Isen when it hit them. Pain. The riders had come to an abrupt halt in the middle of the path. There had been no visible enemy nearby. No physical attack had come, yet there was an intense and piercing pain that tore through the Nazgoul down to their wretched souls. Sauron was still angry with the Nine for what he perceived as their failure to find the ring and let it be known often. Each Nazgoul reacted to the startling assaults. Keening filled the air. The Witch King slipped from his saddle and painfully stumbled to a nearby tree. Duar Jindor and Akurahel followed suit, kneeling on the road. Better to be braced for what was to come than to fall from their steeds. Then they screamed, high-pitched and ear-splitting from the sensation. Their horses answered with screams of their own while rearing back and kicking their front legs at the unseen foe. Had their mounts felt it too, or had they simply replied in kind? The agony had left the ringwraiths trembling from the exertion. Pain. The Nazgoul knew pain. Sauron's gift to them was eternal pain, yet a new sentience swept through them, slipping almost seamlessly into their awareness alongside Sauron's endless presence. Ermerazor gripped the trunk to steady himself. The metallic claws of his gloves dug into the bark of the tree, splintering the wood without him realizing it. Duar was gasping, clutching his chest. Jariandor keened. Akurahel's gloved hand dug into the road. They worked past the throbbing ache to reach an understanding. After all, it had been a lifetime since any of them felt anything other than pain, loss, and despair. This new consciousness was light, calm, and soothing. Peace, hope. What had caused these new sensations? The Witch King's body jolted in surprise as the answer came to him with a shock of absolute clarity. Each ringwraith turned to look at their brothers as understanding came to them, and as one turned to their leader. Ermerazor nodded once in silent agreement. The Master had come to Middle-earth. I'm okay, Harry gasped out. Harry was panting for reasons he didn't understand, and he was getting quite lightheaded. Easy now, slow your breathing, the air is thinner here than on your world, came the deep voice of Celephane. No, Seliph, Luna's father, only she wasn't Luna. Harry's mind was muddled, and he was finding it very hard to focus. So he gave up trying to remember names for the moment and concentrated on his breathing. In slowly through the nose. Out slowly through the mouth. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The man that wasn't Mr. Lovegood gently rested his hand on Harry's shoulder when he continued to speak. Harry could feel the heat of the man's touch, and it calmed Harry's breathing. The teen took a shaky breath in and slowly exhaled. The warmth of the Valar has cleansed you, so you will not bring any foreign diseases to our lands. We, too, were subjected to such a thorough cleansing upon our persons when we entered Earth. It can be a bit invasive, a bit. Harry could do nothing but snort in amusement, followed by a groan. In reply, Celeborn, right, that was his name, maybe gave Harry's shoulder a comforting squeeze. The Valar has blessed you with good health in thanks for coming to our aid. Helping Harry into a seated position, Celeborn said, welcome to Middle-earth. Thanks, Harry began as he looked around and squinted at his surroundings. His vision was swimming and blurred in a headache-inducing fashion. Harry pulled his glasses off and rubbed his eyes tiredly. You won't be needing those, Harry, Luna told her friend. As Atar said, the Valar has gifted you good health. The young wizard was stunned that he could see, his vision perfect. Harry looked at his surroundings in utter awe. They had landed at the edge of the woods, overlooking a quick-flowing river. Everything a beautiful, lush green. Harry could feel the magic in the air. Harry crisscrossed his legs before him as he sat there, taking it all in. Luna was sitting on Harry's left, not caring that she was most likely getting her white dress dirty. And Celeborn sat on his right, also apparently not caring that he was wearing white. Wicked. Harry looked at his glasses in his hands and then at the world around him again, before grinning hugely at his friend. Harry sat up straight, rolled his shoulders, and extended his legs. Harry hadn't felt this good he couldn't remember the last time he hadn't felt some form of residual pain somewhere in his body. Harry looked up at the clear blue sky, raised his glasses in a toasting gesture, and grinned. Cheers. You have returned at long last after years without a word of your well-being, came a lilting, amused, musical voice from behind them, and instead of coming to greet your mother to ease her worried mind like a proper daughter should, I find you sitting in dirt. Luna squealed in happiness, hopped up, and leapt at the newest arrival, crying out, Maneth! The woman Harry saw embracing his friend was stunningly beautiful. It was hard not to stare at her in awe, but Harry did his best not to be so gauche. Celeborn gave Harry a knowing grin before he stood and shook out his robes. Harry followed suit and scrambled to his feet. Celeborn gestured towards Luna and Neneth. Yes, that was what Luna had called her. Come, you must meet the Lady of the Wood. Harry wasn't afraid to meet Luna's mom, even if she was the most captivating woman, elf, person being. Harry took a calming breath. There was just something powerfully mesmerizing about the woman that gave Harry pause. The Lady of the Wood had a strong presence that was not easily dismissed, a power more intense, yet different than Dumbledore's. Still, Harry was a Gryffindor. He could do this. Harry faced down Voldemort. He could very well meet Luna's mother. Celeborn was just releasing his hold on Neneth by the time Harry reached them. The majestic man gestured to him, never taking his eyes off his wife. Telerin Quenia a LOTR, when this is the young wizard Harry Potter. The woman turned her blue eyes on him, and their gazes met. The wizard froze in his approach, and found he couldn't or lacked the will to move. Which one? Harry wasn't quite sure. You've kept my family away longer than expected. I'm sorry, was Harry's reply, though it came across as a question. The young wizard wasn't sure what else he could say. It wasn't as if Harry purposefully kept Luna, what was her other name, and Celeborn away from Middle-earth. Naneth! Luna scolded. It is not Harry's fault. No, Naneth acquiesced. It was yours, Lenovely. Lenovely? Right, that's what Luna said. Her name was. Lenovely, not Luna. Harry doubted he'd remember that name, and decided he'd continue to call her by Luna, at least within his own head. The Lady of the Wood hadn't taken her gaze from Harry's as she spoke. Luna pouted as Celeborn continued the introductions. Harry Potter, this is my mate, my heart Galadriel. Lady of Lorien, Lady of the Galadriel, Lady of the Wood, and Lady of Light. Harry was confused. Celeborn said her name was Galadriel, but Luna called her Neneth, and then it clicked for Harry. Galadriel was Luna's mum. Neneth must have meant mum or mother. Harry felt a bit silly and felt a blush rise. Before he could stop it, but Galadriel continued to address Harry, utterly ignoring any introductions being attempted. There was a dark taint upon you. Yet it did not corrupt you. How is this possible? Galadriel's words weren't accusing, simply curious. The woman's gaze flitted over the teen as she awaited his explanation. Harry squirmed under the scrutiny and finally was able to utter a stilted response. It was a Horcrux. I was a Horcrux, Harry said and promptly elaborated when Galadriel cocked her head in confusion. That's what we call a soul container. He took a deep breath and calmed his nerves. Voldemort, the Dark Lord that I vanquished, Luna prompted. Vanquished, sure. Harry glanced at his friend with a grateful grin. Anyhow, Voldemort was apparently afraid to die. He did a magical ritual to cheat death. He broke his soul into 7 pieces and put them in soul containers called Horcruxes. Then he stashed them around in different secret, heavily guarded places. So long as even one of his Horcruxes remained whole, Voldemort would live. I had to hunt them down to make sure they were all destroyed. That way he would be mortal and finally killed. I was an accidental Horcrux. Voldemort didn't know he... Harry's eyes slipped closed, and his words tapered off when Galadriel's fingertips brushed across his forehead. When did she get close enough to do that? And stopped on his lightning bolt scar. Her cool touch was like a soothing balm, and Harry sighed faintly. Galadriel's words were melodiously spoken, yet clearly heard by everyone. Your soul is a beacon of light in the darkness. His eyes fluttered open, and Harry blinked a time or two before he could manage to put his thoughts into words. Is that a good thing? Because the way you said that, I'm thinking it might not be. Galadriel laughed and stepped back from the young wizard. I see why my daughter is fond of you. The woman looked to her husband. Celeborn didn't need any further prompting. He stepped forward and offered his arm to his wife. Galadriel looped her hand in the crook of his elbow and beckoned the two to follow along. Come, Middle-earth is awakening, and we'll learn of your arrival soon enough. Harry offered his arm to Luna, much as Celeborn had to Galadriel. When his friend was close, he lowered his voice and mentioned, Your mother didn't answer my question. Was Luna's response, which didn't answer his question either. "Oh, that's not ominous," Harry muttered under his breath. Luna giggled and beamed at him. "Nothing more than what you're already accustomed to."
Right. About that.
"I was hoping this time around wouldn't be filled with so many secrets, half-truths, and riddles. Dumbledore was big on secrets, manipulations, and not telling you something until he deemed that you were ready to be told. Even if it meant he died and someone else had to give me a clue. His methods nearly cost Ron our friendship, and it cost Snape his life." Harry watched Galadriel's retreating form, wondering if Luna would respond to what he had been saying, but wasn't overly surprised when she didn't. Harry's steps began to slow as he took in their new surroundings. Luna pressed closer to him and said in a quiet voice, "This is Lothlorien, also called the Golden Woods by some." Lothlorien was very much as its namesake implied. It was dawn, and the sun was emerging from the other side of the world, with its orange and yellow beams of light rising warmly over lush grass, brilliantly colored flowers, and numerous large trees. Harry noticed that each tree was huge, not just in width, but also in height, and each large tree had a set of stairs wrapped around their expansive trunk. Unlike the grand staircase in Hogwarts, made of marble, had trick steps, and occasionally moved, these stairs seemed to be made of white wood that looked as if they grew directly out of the tree's trunk as it circled upwards. Harry grinned at the craftsmanship of the banisters that wrapped over the stairs, giving it a cover like roof, even though the sides were completely open to the elements. The style reminded him of the covered bridge that Seamus and Neville blew up during the... Harry felt his grin slip away, and he forcefully cleared his thoughts of the battle at Hogwarts. He looked up as much as he could manage without falling backwards, but try as he might, Harry couldn't see where the stairs finally led to. The tops were much too high for him to see from the ground. It eventually became evident that Harry was no longer guiding Luna behind her parents. Harry was so enraptured by the sights above them that he hadn't noticed when Luna stopped moving until she tugged on his arm to keep him from toppling into Celeborn and Galadriel. Harry's gaze dropped back to Luna, and he gave her a lopsided grin. "Sorry, there's just so much to take in." Galadriel's voice carried over to them. "You have time to explore before your journey begins, although your training comes first." "Training?" Harry's eyes widened slightly at the thought of getting what he imagined would be some sort of mysterious elf training. "Excellent. What sort of training?" A male throat cleared behind him, and Harry's head snapped in that direction as his hand instinctively drew out his wand in one fluid movement. The man that had silently approached the strolling quartet soon found a wand point, lit with a spell barely held, inches from his chest. Harry's eyes were narrowed, jaw clenched, and his stance was decidedly hostile. Luna smiled at her friend and slowly lowered Harry's wand. "It's okay, Harry. We're safe here. This is Haldir, March Warden of Lorien. Haldir, this is my friend, Harry Potter." Haldir didn't move, nor speak. The elf merely stood with his hands clasped behind his back before he raised a questioning eyebrow at Harry. Harry's wand arm dropped fully to his side. He had to blink to assure himself that he was truly seeing the man in front of him and not a ghost. Harry's voice came out a bit shaky. "Hello," as he tried to hold back a shudder because Haldir just resembled a blonde elf version of Professor Snake. While Haldir wasn't an ugly, greasy-haired, crooked-nosed, yellow-toothed git, they both had that haughty, you-are-beneath-me air about them, and then there was that raised eyebrow. After a few more moments, Haldir gave Harry a small nod of acknowledgement before turning his full attention to the rest of the quartet. "Alden, my lady. Alan Sila Lumen Omentielvo, Lord Celeborn, Lady Lenovole." There was a large gathering of elves around them. They had moved so silently that Harry hadn't heard any of them approach, and there had to be hundreds of them. Each elf, both male and female, was tall, slender, blonde, and lovely. They were all welcoming Celeborn and Luna back to Middle-earth. Some glanced at Harry with open curiosity, yet none approached him. Harry fought back the urge to shrink away from everyone. Not only was he the only human within sight, Harry was also the only brunette. "Come," Lady Galadriel spoke, silencing her people with a single word. She stood facing the crowd at the top of the first rotation of stairs on the nearest tree. "It is time to properly welcome our guest and show him the hospitality of elves." Before training could begin, the first order of business was a new wardrobe for Harry. The young wizard was already taller than Luna, so it hadn't come to his attention that he'd grown several centimeters during his cleansing courtesy of the Valar. Apparently, more than just Harry's eyesight had been corrected. The healthy wizard now stood as tall as his father had, and all the years cramped, starving, and neglected in a cupboard were a memory best forgotten. While Harry knew spells to alter the length of his earth clothes that he had brought with him, Luna suggested dressing like the others would help him blend in to a degree. Harry's first fortnight in Middle-earth had been filled with food, drink, song, stories, and dance each evening. Harry didn't have to tell his tale, as Luna and Celeborn told enough stories to keep their audience entertained. More surprising, and to Harry's delight, was that the elves were more interested in hearing about the magic both Luna and Celeborn managed to accomplish while in Harry's world than in Harry's adventures, or the demise of Voldemort. That's not saying the masses weren't curious, they were just too polite to ask questions. The following weeks were filled with exploring, lessons, and weapons training. Exploring was the most fun of the three tasks. Luna and Harry wandered around Lothlorien and the surrounding woods, comparing the differences between their worlds. Their friendship grew closer each day. Harry found Luna's presence a comfort and one day realized he viewed her like a sister, much as he did Hermione. Lessons covered everything from the Elven language and lore, herb lore, histories of Middle-earth and its races, Quendi, Adane, Parian, and Nogrim. These lessons weren't a formal affair. It was usually Harry talking one-on-one with the teacher of the day as they took a walk around Lothlorien. Luna attended most herb lore lessons since the subject resembled so closely to herbology. The two siblings enjoyed comparing the two subjects and would often carry an herbology tome with them while they walked. Many of Harry's herbology books from school, as well as a few from the Black Library that Hermione had stashed in her beaded bag, had names scribbled into the margins such as Athelas, Eleanor, Lasuin, Alfirin, Semblemene, and Saragon, next to their counterparts within the pages. Training with the Lothlorien guards was the most intense task and took up most of Harry's time. He was being trained in weapons, bow, long daggers, and swords. Harry would admit, even aloud to any who'd ask, that he wasn't much of a swordsman, but he took to the bow quite quickly and wasn't too shabby with a set of long daggers. Luna was better than Harry was with the weapons, but that wasn't something Harry was too worried about. Harry still had his magic. Tracking the enemy was another new skill he was learning. Only Harry found he became the prey more often than being the predator. A fact that amused the Lothlorien guards and annoyed Haldir, his instructor. Harry had better luck with skirmishes. While Harry wasn't fond of killing, he wasn't new to it, and Harry knew that he was preparing for another war. Besides, the goblins Harry had faced would have killed him without a moment's hesitation had he allowed them the chance. During any free time he could manage, Harry continued his lessons and training in magic. Luna was his personal tutor for all theory-based learning, using the books contained in Hermione's red beaded bag. Harry was determined not to make the same mistakes he had made during the Wizarding War. He learned quite a bit about subjects he had foolishly ignored during his schooling, such as runes, arithmancy, and potions. Sure, Harry had taken potions classes along with the rest of his yearmates, but that didn't mean he learned much under Snape's tutelage. With Luna's help, Harry made numerous potions, wrote rune chains, and did a few arithmancy creations for possible new spells. Harry found he had an aptitude for each of these subjects with Luna's aid, and he advanced far in a short time. Then there was the practical side of Harry's magical training. Harry practiced magic dueling, much to the delight of the observing elves. Watching Harry magically spar with enchanted targets that Luna helped him create became such a favored pastime that Harry was compelled to erect a magical barrier specially designed by Luna and himself to keep spells in and spectators out. Harry was soon combining magic with his other lessons. With Luna's help, Harry enchanted his dragon boots to be silent and liberally used disillusionment spells when tracking, so adding magical enhancements for sharpness, durability, and strength to his daggers was a natural next step. Yet the most notable memory to date since Harry's arrival to Middle-earth was the night Luna woke with a scream of pain. Harry had been the first to arrive at her bedside, wand in hand, ready to defend his sister in all but blood. Luna sat in her bed, frantically looking around her as if watching unseen foes approach. There had been no one in her room as Harry made his way to Luna's side. Harry reached out to grab her, pulling Luna into his arms to comfort her, and was sucked into her living nightmare. Instead of holding Luna, Harry was cradling what appeared to be a young boy with curly brown hair, pale skin glowing in the moonlight, and pain-filled blue eyes. The boy was groaning in agony and clutching his chest, where he had just been stabbed. Harry wasn't sure what to make of the predicament. He suddenly found himself in and looked around, taking in their surroundings, assessing the situation. They were outside, bordered by darkness, with shadowed figures looming over them and a campfire burning brightly in the center. There were 5 cloaked figures, each carrying long swords, reminding Harry of Dementors or wraiths. There was a movement to his right, and Harry looked up at one of the wraiths. The cloaked foe that had just stabbed the boy was poised to run his blade through Harry, but when the wizard looked at him, the figure froze mid-step. Stranger still, the hooded figure cried out, dropped its blade to the ground with a clatter, and staggered backwards, straight into the campfire. The entire scene began fading as another person, brandishing a flaming torch in one hand and a long sword in the other, leapt at one of the cloaked figures with a mighty war cry. Harry looked back down at the boy in his arms. As moments passed, the boy began shivering and curling into himself. Not knowing what else he could do for the boy, Harry quickly casted Ep1. Harry wasn't sure it would help much, but perhaps the spell would slow the bleeding until real medical help could arrive. The boy looked bleary-eyed at Harry, and the young wizard rocked him gently. To keep him from panicking, Harry told the boy, "You're going to be okay. Just hold on. Everything will be okay." Luna gripped Harry's shirt. Blood stained the front of her nightgown, but yet there was no wound on her body. Luna was gasping for air, and with a hiccup and a shudder, she calmed. There was a bang as the bedroom door burst open. Harry's instincts were still on high alert, and his wand was aimed, with a spell on his lips, before the fact that it was the girl's parents rushing in could register. Celeborn called a warning. Galadriel? No! But the spell was already rushing towards her. The war veteran tackled his wife to the floor as the spell flew inches over their heads and hit the wall behind them. But everyone was very still for a moment, taking in what had just happened. Luna flew off the bed to her parents, followed by Harry. Celeborn helped Galadriel to sit up. "I am well." Galadriel brushed off their concern. "A bit bruised, perhaps, but I will survive." "I'm sorry," Harry cried out, his wand clattering to the floor. "I thought Luna was in trouble? Then I was with this boy, and I saw these Dementor-looking guys. One stabbed the boy, was going to stab me, and suddenly I'm back here. There was a bang, and you were running in." "Nazgoul," Galadriel said, her head tilted slightly while staring intently at Harry. The boy, who had been crouching beside the woman, dropped to his arse and sat gobsmacked. With only a glance, Galadriel had seen what Harry had just lived through, and unlike Snape, her Legilimen's spell was painless. Galadriel finally caught sight of Luna's nightgown and cried out Lenovi as she gripped her daughter by the arms. Luna shook her head. "I am fine, mother." "But you are bleeding," Galadriel said. In confusion, "It was the boy," Harry interrupted. "I reached for Luna, but was holding a stabbed boy instead." "That was no boy," Galadriel corrected. "That is the ring-bearer." "It was him. It was the master." The Witch King had nearly run him through with his Morgul blade. Murazur dropped his weapon in shock at seeing the master. So young, so alive, protecting the halfling, then Miwe. The Witch King backed away from the master and stumbled into the campfire, but the pain was nothing compared to the ache at the knowledge of what he'd nearly done. The Witch King needed to go. The halfling had put on the ring. It was how Murazur found him in the first place, which temporarily gained his gaze. The Nazgoul needed to retreat immediately to pull his gaze away from Weathertop, away from the master. Murazur called to the Nazgoul, and they obediently followed him. They ran to their steeds, and rode in the opposite direction. There was already dissension in the ranks over the master's arrival. They had argued over loyalties, and the unity of the group was splintering. The fact that the master appeared so suddenly and was protecting the halfling would certainly break them for certain. The Witch King wanted to speak about what he just saw, but all conversation was temporarily set aside as they heard a rider in the distance. The halfling. The other Nazgul dutifully changed direction, but the master was too close. Murazur commanded his subordinates to follow as he continued back towards Bree. "Harry," Luna called out as he flew past her window in the early hours of the chilly morning. The sun was just rising over the horizon, but that wasn't going to stop Harry from getting some flying in before the day officially started. The wizard pulled up short on his broom and zipped over to where his friends stood. Harry grinned at Luna. Megovanen, Guatho, you are up early. Luna leaned against the window frame. I'm just getting a bit of flying in before we leave for the hunt, Harry said. He was a bit torn about the upcoming event. He was honored to be considered for the hunt. Harry was being trusted to go with Haldir and a small group of guards. Goblins had been spotted coming from the Misty Mountains. Usually when Harry went hunting, it was with large groups of guards, but starting that evening, the young wizard would be gone for an undisclosed amount of time, and all of his other training was put on hold. Well, come back inside. I have a Yuletide gift for you, Luna stated matter-of-factly before turning around and walking away from the window. Yuletide, Harry ducked inside and dismounted his broom. He was confused by the new Elvish word that Luna had used and asked, "What's Yuletide?" "Yuletide, Harry," Luna laughed. "It's one of your holidays." That brought Harry up short, and he blinked in surprise. The elves he dealt with daily either spoke Westernorrent or at the very least understood it, which, luckily for Harry, was nearly the same as the Queen's English. While Harry's understanding of the Elven language was getting better, he didn't always fully understand everything and mostly pieced conversations together. Occasionally Harry tried speaking Elvish, but usually butchered either the pronunciation or the phrasing, said the wrong word, or a mixture of the two. Harry hadn't realized that Luna had just slipped back into English when she was speaking to him earlier. Harry exclaimed, "Yuletide? Is it December already?" "Yes." Luna tossed a glance over her shoulder at him. "We have been back for 3 months already. Do you not miss home yet?" Harry followed Luna across the sitting room and paused. "I'd have thought I would. If not my world, at least I'd miss our friends." He leaned his broom against a nearby wall and ran his fingers through his wind-blown hair. "I suppose I've just been too busy. If you would, I need your help. I had brought this back with us for Mother." Luna held out an extremely small box and wiggled her fingers over it in an odd little gesture. "Will you enlarge it back to normal for me?" Harry chuckled softly at her finger gesture and mimicked her. To Luna's surprise, the package did indeed enlarge as she had requested. "Wandless and silent?" "Magic is easier here," Harry admitted. "I've been practicing the easier spells in my room. First, I was able to accomplish silent casting, and then wandless. Just recently, I managed both at the same time. In public, I still use my wand, and most often speak the spells, since it's easier." Harry shrugged sheepishly. "This is the first time I've done that in front of anyone." "That's wonderful, Harry." Luna set her mother's gift on a table beside 2 others and encouraged her friend, "What else can you do?" "Just this." Harry snapped his fingers and flattened his hand, palm up. A ball of blue light bloomed, then hovered inches over Harry's palm. It looked much like the bluebell flames that Hermione enjoyed creating, only shaped in a ball. Luna reached out to touch the small ball of light, but Harry rolled his hand in a circular fashion, causing the ball of blue light to sway out of her reach. Luna giggled, and Harry's grin grew. The two laughed as Luna chased Harry and his ball of blue light around the room until she reached for the blue light again, only to pop it out of existence. The light extinguishing so abruptly caught the two by surprise, and they laughed at the absurdity of their behavior. Harry grimaced as his smile faded. Luna was his best friend in Middle-earth, and he failed to make her a gift. Harry sighed softly and said, "I hadn't realized it was Yuletide already. I don't..." "No." Harry, Luna cut him off, preventing any self-disparaging remarks before turning away from him. Luna walked back to the table where the wizard's gift was still waiting for him and stated, "You need not worry about having forgotten. This is not one of our holidays, so gifts are not expected. Besides, it is not as if you have been idle since arriving." Although Luna grinned at Harry mischievously, "You are clever. I'm sure you can make it up to me." Harry snorted a laugh at that and joined her at the table. Of course, Luna nudged him playfully. "It is why I gave it to you." Unlike the box he enlarged for Luna, his gift was a large cloth bundle tied with twine. He untied the bundle carefully and found it was a cloak. The garment was long and nearly brushed the floor, made of soft, deep green fabric that whispered when touched, and a hood that cast his face in shadow without hindering his vision. Holding the cloak together was a golden Lothlorien leaf clasp, just like those that the elven guards wore when they hunted. As Harry went to shake out the cloak, he noted there was an entire outfit wrapped inside straight down to a leather belt, and matching boots. Harry grinned and held the clothing up to inspect them. The tunic was of soft white silk, with gold embroidery. The pants matched with the small embroidery along the seams from the hip to the slightly flared bottom. While the cloak is better than the shorter one that I've been using, these clothes are not exactly what a guard would wear for a hunt. It is traditional garb for feasting, Luna said, and dismissed any of Harry's concerns with a wave of her hand. You will look quite dashing. I have seen a fair few elves eyeing you, both female and male, plus we may have occasion for you to be dressed in something finer than your everyday clothing. Harry couldn't help it. He snorted in amusement. You sound like Nan. There is a reason for that, Luna said as she rested a hip on the table's edge. It was her suggestion that you begin dressing properly, if for nothing else than someone to warm your nights. He was looking over the clothing when her words clicked inside his head. But Harry wasn't believing what he thought he understood because it made no sense to him at all. Wait, what? Luna laughed merrily. I was wondering if you had heard me or not. I heard, but I'm sure I misunderstood you, Harry said in disbelief. No Quendi female or male has been eyeing me. You doubt the word of your sister? Galadriel teased her new son as she walked in with Celeborn at her side. You scoff at the notion, but I have bore witness to the gossiping throngs. Is it so difficult to believe that others find you charming and fetching? Yes, Harry exclaimed upon hearing Galadriel's words. Harry cringed at his own vehemence, but really, who would look at him in that way when there were hundreds of beautiful beings to choose from? Still, Harry hadn't meant to be so rude to his mother. He forced a look of neutrality before he turned to face his adopted mother, but Harry wasn't going to back down. My apologies, Nainth, but it's the truth. I find that impossible to believe. Both of Galadriel's eyebrows rose in surprise, and her eyes widened. It was a long, silent moment before her tinkling laughter filled the room. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I only speak the truth. Celeborn put an arm around his wife's waist. Come, it is time for the morning repast. It may be some time before you will be back to join us again. When Harry went to join his parents, Luna huffed and pointed at his new outfit. With a long-suffering sigh, Harry acquiesced. I'll be down in a moment, Harry gestured with the cloak. Apparently I need to change first. A splendid idea, Celeborn said. Lenovely will wait for you. I want to be seated before you get there. When Harry just gave him a confused look, Celeborn chuckled. I want to be able to see everyone's reaction when you enter the hall, dressed in your new clothes. Harry groaned, but didn't argue. He simply scooped up the new clothing and made his way towards his room, grabbing his broom as he went past. Luna's giggles joined Galadriel's as he closed his door. Tossing the clothes on his bed, Harry stowed his broom back in his school trunk. He looked around his room and scratched his head. Other than missing the canopy with drapes over the bed and the traditional red and gold coloring, the setup of the room was similar to the Gryffindor dorm, providing there was only one person per room. At the foot of the bed, Harry had set his school trunk. To the right of the bed was an armoire, and to the left was a desk laden with most of his books and Hermione's red beaded bag. Changing quickly, Harry was just tugging on his boot when Luna ran into the room, without knocking. Hurry, Harry. What's wrong? Harry asked, immediately reaching for his wand. Luna waved off his concern by saying Eladan and Elro here have arrived. Before Harry could ask, she explained further, They are my nephews. They are from Rivendell. Their mother, Cebrian, is my older sister. She left for the Grey Havens before I was born. The one father spoke to you about. Anyhow, they have brought news. Let us hurry. I have not seen them in many years. Harry had barely gotten his second boot on before Luna was dragging him from the room and out of their dwelling. In her excitement, Luna rambled on about the fun she had while growing up with her nephews and niece, their sister, Arwen. Eladan was the taller twin by nearly a centimeter, and Elrokir was older by 5 minutes, and both were nearly 3 millennia older than she was. They were both grown men, as she was still considered a youngling, but Arwen was closer to her in age, and only a decade older. That bit of information had Harry giving her a sideways glance, and she grinned at him. Ask. Nope, Harry rejected the notion of asking any female what age they were. He had learned that lesson from his harpy of an aunt, and learned it the hard way. Harry was adamant when he said, that would be rude. I am nearing a century, still considered by firstborn standards as merely a teen. You can imagine how reluctant my mother was to allow me to go to your world, even with father's supervision. But age-wise, I was the most logical choice. Luna said it so offhandedly that she had left Harry staring utterly gobsmacked at her. She was halfway down the walkway, almost to the dining hall, before she realized her friend was no longer beside her. Luna whipped around and nearly stomped her foot in frustration until she saw the bewildered look on Harry's face. Instead of being annoyed that Harry was delaying her from seeing her nephews, Luna began laughing. Harry stood agape and floundering. Yes, Harry, I am 97, if you want to be more precise. I will be considered an adult in 3 years. Luna stated quite matter-of-factly. Harry's mouth closed with a snap, and he blinked once, twice, before shaking his head as if that action would dislodge the notion that his newest sibling was older than Dumbledore before he was killed. Luna walked back to Harry and took his hand once more in hers. I am an elf, Harry. We age differently than humans. Those of us with pure elven blood are considered immortal. That is not to say I cannot die. I would have to be killed as I would not die of old age. There are elves that are part human. They can be mortal if they choose that life. It all comes down to blood status, eh? Harry snorted in amusement. Wizarding blood status was a stupid reason to go to war over. I can't imagine the Quendi would do such a thing. Luna managed to get Harry moving again. Can we please put off the debate of mortality until after I see my nephews? Sorry, Harry said sheepishly. There's just so much to take in. The dining hall was buzzing with excitement, the likes Harry hadn't seen since their arrival in Middle-earth. There was a throng of elves seated at the tables. None were eating or drinking. All were just listening for news or tales. In the center of it all were two males identical in their looks, but their voices weren't. Harry could hear that one tone was slightly lower in pitch than the other. The pair were dressed differently than most of the elves he had met so far. Their clothing was rugged and lightly fur-lined in the common greens and browns, most guards and hunters preferred, but what really made the pair stand out more than anything else was their hair color. Among the sea of blonde elves, the twins were brunettes, like Harry. One of the twins caught sight of the newcomers to the dining hall, and he nudged his brother in the ribs before calling out, Nethamig, free. All eyes turned towards the doorway, and the excited murmurs began again. Luna ran, while still holding on to Harry's hand, towards her nephews. Both men stood from the table and made their way towards the pair that had just entered the dining hall. Luna cried out with laughter, Arrowhair! Eladon! Harry had no choice but to run at Luna's side or risk landing on his face. Luna's action had Harry missing the approving looks he received for his new garb. Celeborn grinned in amusement as he noted each appreciative glance at his son's physique. If Harry hadn't had rounded ears, he could easily pass as an elf from Imladris with his tall, slender, and muscular build, pale skin, and handsome, noble features. It wasn't until Luna leapt into one of the twins' embrace that she let go of her hold on her friend. Unfortunately, momentum was not on Harry's side, and he nearly went crashing into the other twin. Thankfully, the young man saw Harry coming and caught him by the shoulders with a crooked grin. Careful. With a sigh of relief, Harry held out his hand. Thanks, I'm Harry. Well met, Harry. I am Eladon of the Rangers. Eladon clasped Harry's forearm firmly. And that buffoon swinging little Lenovo around like a child's toy is my brother. Arrowhair set Luna down on her feet and scoffed at his twin. Buffoon, he says, had he gotten to our little aunt before he would have been the one swinging her about. Arrowhair held out his hand to Harry, which the wizard grasped as he had with Eladon. Well met, Harry. Your coming has been foretold for many centuries. That's what I've heard, Harry winced. Still laughing, Luna opined. But no pressure to save wizards from their own stupidity. No, just saving this world as you know it from a Dark Lord even more powerful than Voldemort, Harry said with a long-suffering sigh. Luna's laughter died away, and she hugged her friend fiercely. You will not be alone, I will go with you. Many cried out in alarm at that proclamation. Only one voice was louder than Harry's. Galadriel scolded, You will do no such thing. Elrose stilled Luna's rebuttal with a hand on her shoulder. Be at peace, Lenovo. There is no need for you to accompany Harry, for we come with news. It had been a few weeks since the Twin Rangers brought news of the Fellowship. While some speculated their route might bring them near Lothlorien, others thought the notion ridiculous, and then there were those that knew that they would not just come nearby but enter Lothlorien itself because of Harry's presence in their woods. After all, why else would the wizard be brought to their domain within Middle-earth if not to meet with the Fellowship? Harry found all the speculations amusing and quietly agreed with those who believed the ring-bearer and his companions would be heading directly to Lothlorien. Harry was on patrol duty at the edge of the woods near the Misty Mountains, where orcs and goblins were known to venture out at night. That night, he was paired with a lion, 4, who pointed west, noting someone approaching. Harry cocked his head and listened. The noise came again, hurried footfalls from several running persons heading towards their woods, and Harry dropped from the branches to the soft ground below, with nary a sound. A lion dropped silently down beside him. It was approaching dusk when the Fellowship came into view. They were moving quickly towards the woods as if racing the sun. Their pace didn't slow until they had reached the safety of the trees. The Lothlorien hunting parties had been watching for their arrival since they had been warned of the Fellowship's travels, and the time had finally arrived for Earth's wizard to join them on their quest. Harry looked over the group as they approached. It was as Elfshire had said, 2 humans, Aragorn and Boromir, an elf, Legolas, a dwarf, Gimli, and 4 hobbits, 2 blonde, 2 brunettes going by the names of Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Harry met the ring bearer, so he knew which of the hobbit was Frodo. It was obvious who was Legolas and Gimli, but only time would tell which human was destined to be king. Harry frowned and counted the new arrivals again. 8. There should have been 9. Harry silently speculated what had happened to their wizard. Then a thought began niggling at him. What if Gandalf was disillusioned as he was? When Alion's hushed voice spoke beside him, the wizard? Silently casting the Homeo Revelio spell, just to be certain. Harry watched the group and quickly counted again, before confirming. Only 8 approached. The advancing group had run in a line, elf, human, dwarf, 4 hobbits, and human. Once they had reached the trees, that order was lost to momentary chaos as the hobbits were huddled in a group in the center as the taller folk walked around them as if they formed a barrier to any outsiders. Harry found the setup flawed, but supposed there was some sense to it. If nothing more than to serve as peace of mind for the hobbit. As the group neared the disillusioned wizard, the dwarf started speaking in low hushed tones. Stay close, young hobbits. They say a sorceress lives in these woods. Gimli's gaze passed over Harry without stopping. The dwarf appeared to be searching for any threats. An elf witch with terrible power. All who look upon her fall under her spell. Harry smirked at Gimli's words, but kept still. It was Harry and a lion's duty to bring up the rear of the guard. Frodo hesitated with wide, frightened eyes, but Gimli hadn't noticed him and continued speaking, and are never seen again. Another of the hobbits, one of the blondes, prodded at his frightened friend, Mr. Frodo. Harry's eyes darted to Frodo, wondering what had spooked the young hobbit. The movement may have been more dramatic than intended because Harry felt someone's gaze fall towards him. Being disillusioned wasn't the same as being under his invisibility cloak, but only his family knew about that artifact, and Harry wasn't keen to share it. Frodo didn't respond to the blonde verbally. He just shook his head and kept walking. Harry slowly turned his head and met the gaze of a man, tall of stature, brunette, and tired-looking. He appeared weary as well as wary, but soon the man shook his head as if doubting his own eyes, and continued moving. During that entire time, the dwarf was still rambling on. Gimli's voice was full of confidence when he proclaimed, a bit louder than he probably intended to. Well, here's one dwarf she won't ensnare so easily. I have the eyes of a hawk and the ears of a fox. After the last man passed, Harry raised his bow and knocked an arrow before dropping his disillusion spell. The group quickly found that they were surrounded by an armed guard of a half-dozen hooded elves, or what appeared to be a half-dozen hooded elves, but was really 5 elves and a human wizard. Haldir stood at the front of the group and was the only one to lower his hood. The Marchwarden wrinkled his nose in distaste, stating, "The dwarf breathed so loud we could have shot him in the dark." It was rare for Haldir to speak Westron, and the words he chose were so reminiscent of Professor Snape's snark that Harry tightened his grip on his bow to hold back the shudder. An audible creak could be heard from his leather glove, causing the man before him to tense further. The man on the left side of the group stepped forward towards Haldir with raised empty hands and spoke in flawless Sindarin. "Haldir of Lothlorien, we come here for your help. We need your protection." From stories told by Eladon, Harry knew that man had to be Aragorn, for he had been raised by elves as a young man. That meant the man standing before Harry with his hand on the hilt of his sword had to be Boromir. The wizard watched the man's hand tighten on the hilt, so Harry touched the tip of his arrow to the man's bare skin at his throat as a warning. Boromir stiffened before easing away ever so slightly from the sharp point, but stilled his hand all the same. The dwarf tightened his grip on his battle axe and exclaimed, "Aragorn, these woods are perilous. We should go back." Haldir raised an eyebrow and calmly stated, "You have entered the realm of the Lady of the Wood. You cannot go back." Before Haldir turned to lead the group away, he looked down at Frodo and directed, "Come, she is waiting." The Fellowship began moving once again, only they weren't moving freely any longer. They were being herded forward by the Lothlorien guards. The guards weren't there to harm the Fellowship, but the group of travelers didn't necessarily know that. Harry was still at the back of the group, as was his station. Legolas slowed his pace until he walked beside Harry and gave him a side glance. Neither spoke for a long moment until they reached the vista. The sight of the Maulers always made Harry feel welcome, and he couldn't stop the small smile that graced his face. He hadn't paid attention to Legolas because the view took his full attention. But Harry cocked his head towards the elf when he softly spoke, "You are not of the firstborn." It wasn't a question, so Harry didn't answer. It took all of his willpower not to react to what was said. Harry watched the reactions of the others around them. Haldir looked at Harry with an amused smirk before moving forward again. The other guards acted as if they hadn't heard a thing and prodded the Fellowship to keep moving. Aragorn turned his attention to Legolas with a questioning look between the elf and Harry. Instead of confirming or denying the elf's observation, Harry simply gave a small jerk of his head towards Lothlorien and reminded Legolas, "It is not polite to keep the lady waiting." The group was moving at a steady pace. Harry marveled at how well the hobbits were keeping up with their shorter stature and being forced to take 2 to 3 steps to their one. It was evening by the time the group had made it to the center of Corus Galadon and the base of the main Maldon, where Celeborn, Galadriel, and Luna were waiting for them, each dressed in their brilliant finery that gleamed in the moonlight and an elegant crown sitting on their head, while Galadriel's circlet was complex silver and gold-woven filigree. Celeborn chose to wear a simple slim band, and Luna's circlet was twisted and shaped to look like small glittering Lothlorien leaves danced in her hair. The guards that had escorted the Fellowship took up position behind the visitors in a semicircle with Haldir on the right. Haldir raised his fist to his chest and gave a courteous bow of his head. Celeborn nodded, as did Galadriel, but Luna looked at Harry and gestured him forward. Harry put his arrow back in his quiver and made his way to his family, stopping only to bow to his parents before joining Luna. Celeborn stepped forward and stopped at the edge of the small landing to leave himself a few feet above the new arrivals. His gaze hardened and snapped to Aragorn. 8 there are, yet 9 were set out from Rivendell. Harry was curious about Gandalf's whereabouts, too. He had been looking forward to meeting the wizard. Celeborn continued, "Tell me, where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with him." Galadriel stepped up beside her husband. Her gaze swept the Fellowship, and she put a hand on Celeborn's arm as if forestalling more of his words, or she was simply holding on for support. The woman often spoke as if she hadn't meant to say something aloud. That time was no different when Galadriel's words were soft like an afterthought. "He has fallen into shadow." Luna gripped Harry's arm tightly, and he answered the gesture with a calm hand over hers. They were at the beginning of a war, and those two knew quite well that there would be casualties along the way. Though Harry was disappointed that he hadn't had the chance to meet the man that Luna said would remind him of Dumbledore without the twinkling eyes, flashy robes, and half-moon glasses. Each of the 8 standing before the lady couldn't meet her gaze until she spoke again. First Galadriel looked to Aragorn, then to Boromir, and continued down the line. "The quest stands upon the edge of a knife. Stray but a little, and it will fail. To the ruin of all." Galadriel's eyes settled on Sam. "Yet, hope remains while the company is true." She watched each member of the group as she spoke words of encouragement. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Go now and rest, for you are weary with sorrow and much toil." Galadriel's eyes finally rested on Frodo. "Tonight, you will sleep in peace." Frodo's reaction was odd to any that watched. The smallest of the hobbits seemed to jerk to a standstill and stared in wide-eyed wonder at the lady. Harry glanced at Galadriel and was glad he still had his hood up to hide his grin. Galadriel had her speculative look on her lovely face. Harry was familiar with that calculating gaze. The woman was no sorceress, but that wasn't to say she didn't have her own sort of magic. Galadriel's following words to the Fellowship took them completely by surprise. "Your journey was meant to bring you here." The Fellowship of 9 became 8. Once you leave, it will be 9. Once more, as another star will join you. Reaction to the news of a new companion, let alone a new wizard, wasn't exactly encouraging from the majority of the Fellowship. Aragorn's attention snapped to Harry, but his thoughts were unreadable. Legolas had cocked his head at the teen in a silent question, to which Harry responded with a small nod, and Boromir sputtered something incomprehensible. The hobbits were looking around in confusion, mumbling a soft discussion regarding why they needed a new companion. After all, no one could replace Gandalf. It was the dwarf that blustered the most exuberant as he spouted, "Now see here, milady." Harry wasn't bothered by the immediate rejection from the group, but the look of pain, loss, and hopelessness in Frodo's gaze had nearly undone him. The wizard walked forward, ignoring everyone, and stepped towards the small hobbit. Gimli raised his axe in warning and tried to get in between the two, but Harry held out a hand, calling a protego to mind. A nearly invisible shield sprung into the air and shimmered between them. Gimli stumbled back a few steps and shook his head, as if to clear it. The young wizard stopped a few feet away from Frodo and grinned. The hobbit's little friends now stood between Harry and Frodo with their bare fists up ready to defend him, obviously not deterred by Harry's show of magic against Gimli. Harry could appreciate their loyalty and wasn't about to hurt any of the halflings. Friends were important. Harry understood that, so he stood where he was, finally lowering his hood, and spoke to Frodo directly. "Hello, I'm Harry. I've been brought to Middle-earth to help you destroy that ring." He motioned at the chain around the hobbit's neck, and Frodo immediately clutched the ring in his hand. Harry then added, as an afterthought, "And get rid of a Dark Lord." "The prophecy," Legolas said, as if the thought had just occurred to him. Yes, Harry looked at Legolas, and you are right. I am not of the firstborn, but I have learned much since coming here. "All that can wait," Luna said as she walked up to the group. Luna took Harry's arm before addressing the Fellowship again. "Tonight, you will rest. There will be food and drink in the pavilion." "My Lady Lenovale," Legolas said, in surprise, as if just noticing her presence, and Luna blushed when he continued, "You have returned and yet had not sent word." Legolas's gaze dropped to Luna's hand on Harry's arm, and she jerked as if to drop her hands, but instead held fast even tighter. "That, too, can wait until the morrow." Luna turned her attention to her brother. "Harry, will you—" "Of course, Guatho." Harry kissed Luna's forehead, embarrassing her further, and then ushered the others away. "If you will follow me, I will take you to the accommodations prepared for your stay while you're here." Aragorn appeared highly amused by Harry's antics. The hobbits all looked confused by the turn of events and could be seen whispering to each other while shaking their heads. Gimli kept throwing suspicious glances at Harry, and Boromir walked behind the group, looking lost to the world around him, with only his own thoughts to keep him company. Legolas, on the other hand, looked flummoxed. The elf quickened his steps and strode beside the wizard before asking, "How long have you been here?" "Since the first of the 9th month," Harry answered honestly. He would have to travel and fight alongside the elf. Harry would rather not start their relations with falsity. There could be no trust if he did, and that could lead to disaster, or worse, more death among the group. Besides, it wasn't as if the answer was a secret. Harry glanced at Legolas with an inkling of why he was asking about their arrival back to Middle-earth. A missive was sent from father to your father alerting him of our arrival. With a huff, Legolas responded, "That explains much." "I suppose it does," Harry agreed. Luna was offended when she had not heard from her betrothed. Legolas looked stricken for a moment, but Harry gestured it away. "You are here now. Speak with her tomorrow." Harry gestured towards a pavilion set among the base of the trees near a fountain. The soft sound of the water was soothing. There were couches, tables, and elves delivering food and wine for them. Somewhere above them there was singing, and the mournful tune drifted down to them. Harry looked to the trees, and Legolas closed his eyes to absorb the words, "A lament for Gandalf." Gimli made a beeline for the table of food and drink. Merry, Pippin, Frodo, and Sam followed in his wake. One of the blonde hobbits, Harry, still hadn't been properly introduced, stopped from taking a bite and asked, "What do they say about him?" Legolas dropped his gaze, saying, "I have not the heart to tell you. For me, the grief is still too near." Harry didn't have that issue, so he sat with the hobbit at the table and said, "We haven't been properly introduced. I know you're Frodo." "Which of you is Sam?" Merry, and Pippin. One hobbit perked up. You've heard of me? Depends, Harry said in amusement. Which one are you? Peregrine Took, he said, with a jaunty salute using the slice of beef in his hand. Folks call me Pippin. Meriadoc Brandybuck. Another said, but everyone calls me Mary. Making me Sam, Sam said with a sad grin. Samwise Gamgee, to be all proper like. Frodo's eyes narrowed, but how do you know who I am? I wasn't exactly introduced either. The hobbit's hand immediately went back to the ring, and Harry frowned. You don't remember? We've met before. No. Harry tapped his own chest to indicate where the Morgul blade had pierced Frodo. I don't suppose you would. You were in too much pain. I was there that night. I held you after you were stabbed by the Nazgoul. Besides, I was on guard duty tonight as you were coming in. Sam called you by name. Sam blinked in surprise and then sat up straight. He's right. I did. Just before they all showed up with the arrows in our faces. Harry waved that off. In my defense, my arrow was not pointed in anyone's face. Boromir is taller than you four, so it was at his throat. Oh well, that makes all the difference, Pippin said as he mocked Harry and waved it off too. Merry set his goblet down and leaned forward. So, do you know what they're singing? What they're saying about Gandalf. I am still relatively new to the language, but I will translate what I can. Harry cocked his head and listened. They're singing of Lothlorien the Dreamer, the wisest Maiar. I don't know what that is. The East Star, named Gandalf the Grey, Mithrin Deer, Incinus, Stormcrow. Harry looked at Merry. The man had a lot of names, apparently. The Tired Traveler. No, Tireless Traveler, with his pointed hat, and something staff. Harry went silent for a moment while he listened to the words of the lament before he started translating again. Now they're singing about his smile. No, his mischievous grin, his laughter, his kindness. He's not sure what that last bit was about. Harry listened, and he spoke once more. A battle with the necromancer, no idea what that is either. Now they are speaking of other deeds, battles, the good he has done for the lands and its people. Some parts are repeated, like a refrain. Frodo wasn't eating, and was staring at his hands. Harry peered at him. Is the food not to your liking? Frodo started at being spoken to, and then looked at the food placed on the plate before him. Sorry, I'm not hungry, I guess. Harry watched the others getting their fill of food, or in Gimli's case, drink, and looked at Frodo again. When was the last time you ate? I don't remember. Frodo pushed the plate away and sighed before rubbing at his temples. I just can't eat. That's the guilt talking, Harry said in understanding. Harry was unfortunately very familiar with guilt, and tapped into his inner Luna, stating, whatever it is you're feeling so bad about, I'm sure it wasn't your fault. But Gandalf, did you force him to join you on this mission? Harry cut him off with a question. What? Did you beg, coerce, or deceive Gandalf into joining your merry little tromp through Middle-earth? Did you mislead him with a false sense of adventure without the risk that was surely awaiting you all? No. Then it's not your fault he died. Harry said quite matter-of-factly, but, did you kill Gandalf? Harry asked. No, but... Then Gandalf's death is not your burden to bear, Harry cut Frodo off once more. Grieve for the loss of a great man, mourn your loss of a friend or mentor, and then put that behind you. Gandalf lived life the way he wanted. If the songs are any indication, Harry waved a hand towards the mall, where the singing continued, and he wouldn't appreciate your pity. He'd want you to continue with this quest, and more importantly, you must succeed. That's how you can honor the man. The pavilion area grew quiet, and Harry ignored the feeling of eyes upon him. Frodo gripped the ring hanging from the chain around his neck. Did you know him? Nope, I've never met Gandalf. Harry admitted, Gwaffle, Lady Lenovel, used a similar colloquy to snap me out of my own guilt. Harry took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He needed these people to understand that he was there to help. Harry needed their trust, and one way to do that was to open up and share. So Harry did. There was nothing I could do to stop his death. Harry swallowed hard and met Frodo's gaze. It took me a long time to be able to say those words and mean them. There was nothing I could do to stop his death. Dumbledore, my headmaster, my mentor, my friend, was killed in front of me, and I could do nothing to stop it from happening. We had just gotten back from hunting a Horcrux. Harry indicated the ring Frodo was still gripping. A soul container. That's what we call an artifact similar to that one. We knew there was trouble at the school, and as soon as we landed in the tower, Dumbledore hit me with a jinx. The jinx froze me in place like a statue. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was absolutely useless. Then he covered me. Harry hesitated with a soft inhale of breath, with invisibility to keep me hidden, to keep me safe, and I was forced to watch the greatest wizard to ever live be murdered. There was nothing I could do to stop his death. Harry gave a small snort. That doesn't mean I didn't wallow in my own sorrow, my own pity, and drown in my guilt for months afterwards. There was a war going on, and I was bloody useless. Harry shook his head. So many people died. When Gweddle found me, she wasn't kind with her reprimand. She told me what I needed to hear, and I took the abuse because she was right. Harry shrugged. So moral of the story, don't let this gwath bird console you in your mourning, Gimli said with a snort, a bit of a slur, and then belched loudly. Harry's eyes narrowed, and he stood swiftly, but Legolas was there before he was. Dagger in one hand, Gimli's beard in the other. Take care what you say about my beloved. Hick, what? Gimli swatted ineffectually at Legolas's hand. Legolas. Aragorn called out from the other side of the pavilion. By the time Aragorn made it to the group, Harry had made his way around the table and put a hand on Legolas's shoulder. You're a good man, Legolas. He is in his cups and doesn't know what he's saying. On the other hand, if he speaks ill of my sister tomorrow once he's sober... Harry left the threat open for interpretation. Legolas looked at Harry and released his hold on Gimli, allowing the dwarf to drop back into his seat. The elf nodded, put his dagger back into its sheath, and then stalked away. Can I ask you about that night? Frodo asked hesitantly. Harry looked to the sky to judge the time before turning back to Frodo. I have duties and will need to leave soon. Harry had never liked talking about himself. He had always felt as if no one listened. No one cared, and as loath as he was to admit it, he was ashamed of some things he'd done in the past. He looked at the hobbit and saw that Frodo looked at him with no judgment, only open curiosity and eagerness to learn about that time they shared together with the Nazgoul. Harry was hesitant, but would make the effort to explain what he could. The wizard sat beside Frodo and said, I'll make you a deal. Eat something, and I will answer what I can. Frodo stared at his plate and sighed softly, but acquiesced. He took a few bites before asking, You were there, but how? What do you remember of that night? I remember being stabbed. I remember seeing green eyes staring down at me, telling me it would be okay to hold on. That was me. No one believed me. No one saw you. When I mentioned you, they thought it was the poison from the blade giving me hallucinations. You were right. Only I'm not sure how I was there, Harry said, and folded his hands on the table and leaned forward, motioning for Frodo to take a few more bites before he would continue speaking. Luna, that's what I call Gwethel, my sister, the elfling you met. Luna, Pippin nodded. I think I like that easier than Leno. It's Lenovola, Harry corrected with a small grin. Anyhow, Luna somehow pulled me into a vision she was having that night. It's rare for her to see what is happening as it happens, and had never before pulled someone into a vision. We're not sure why it happened. I went to wake her from what I thought was a nightmare to find myself holding you, instead of my sister. Harry looked at Frodo and frowned. You had just cried out in pain from being stabbed. The Nazgoul took one look at me, dropped his blade, and backed up. I saw that, Aragorn said suddenly. It didn't understand why the Witch King suddenly left Frodo alone and went stumbling backwards into the campfire, but I was grateful for the bit of good luck. Was that you with the torch and sword? Harry asked. Yes, Aragorn said in a whisper. You were really there. A pesky, Frodo suddenly blurted. You said a pesky? That's right, Harry grinned at the hobbit. It was the only healing spell I know. I hoped it would stop the bleeding long enough for you to get medical help. You saved his life, Aragorn stated. He might have bled out if you hadn't done that. Harry just shrugged. That's why I'm here. With another look to the sky to judge the time, Harry saw a lion waiting for him and stood. And now I will take my leave. If you require anything further, just ask. Harry made a vague gesture behind him to indicate a nearby guard that was only visible if you truly looked for him. Before anyone could ask anything further from him, Harry turned on the spot and, with a small pop of displaced air, was gone. It had been 3 weeks since the Fellowship arrived. They were fully healed and well rested. Boromir appeared to be anxious to be on his way. Aragorn and Legolas seemed to be quite at home among the elves. The hobbits were thriving and learning some skills with their weapons. Gimli was somewhat accepted within the home of the elves and was allowed full access within the lower levels of Lothlorien, but never unaccompanied within the tops of the Maularn. Harry rarely went exploring with Luna any longer, while his curiosity about what lay beyond the trees was mostly assuaged by his time on guard duty. The hobbits were inquisitive beings. Harry was tasked to watch over them so they didn't get hurt, lost, or, worse, get up to any tomfoolery. Frodo and Merry looked up when Harry entered the pavilion. Aragorn appeared to have been pointing something out on a map to the duo. Harry, Aragorn began, but hesitated. Yes? That popping thing you do, how far can you go? Aragorn asked. I've never tested it, Harry admitted. Could you maybe go all the way to Mordor? Merry asked. We were just looking at the map and it's a long way away, but if you can just... Merry did some odd thing like an explosive gesture, and Harry snorted in amusement. No matter how far I can. In fact, apparate, I've never been to Mordor, so it won't work. Sorry. Ah well, had to ask, Aragorn said. Harry looked around the pavilion. Something felt off. Legolas was nowhere to be seen, most likely off with Luna again. Boromir had just come from their sleeping area. Gimli was sitting with his feet up, crossed at the ankles, and gave Harry a mischievous grin. You're late. Late? Harry asked. In confusion. He had arrived at the same time every morning for the past 3 weeks. Harry looked around in alarm. Sam and Pippin were missing. That meant trouble. If Pippin got bored or hungry, there was going to be a disturbance. Merry tried to keep Pippin from getting into too much mischief, but usually fatal miserably. Harry looked at the dwarf and demanded, Where is Pippin? Gimli shrugged nonchalantly. I can't say with certainty, but I'd wager the kitchen. They left when Pip got hungry. Bugger, Harry said, and apparated immediately. There were a few areas that the elves left empty so Harry could pop in without injury or incident, and ever since the arrival of the Fellowship, the kitchen was one such area. Harry had just arrived when there was a crash. He winced and turned to assess the destruction that Pippin had created. Only Pippin sat at a counter, eating an apple far away from all the damage. It was Sam that stood in the center of the chaos. A gray sludge with a smattering of limp vegetables lay at his feet. Sam groaned over the loss of what he had been cooking. Aladdin was staring in horror at his sludge-covered boots, and Elder Horror was holding a pot handle, sans the rest of the pot that was currently on the ground with the muck, looking too innocent to be blameless. Hello, Harry, Pippin chirped. El Roucher slipped his left hand behind his back and tried to nonchalantly slip away from the bedlam, but Harry groaned, You two are as bad as Pippin. Oi, Pippin tried to object, but when Harry raised an eyebrow in challenge, the hobbit just shrugged in acceptance and went back to eating his apple. Come now, Honena. 6. Elrohir also tried to object, but Elwodan smacked his brother's arm before swearing faster than Harry could follow, while gesturing to his boots. Harry shook his head at their antics. He would have laughed had he not seen the utter disappointment in Sam's features when their eyes met. Sam deflated. I was hoping to cheer up Mr. Frodo with a taste of home. I'm sorry, Sam, Harry said, and flicked his wrist to release his wand. With a swoosh of magic and a flowing gesture from Harry, the room began cleaning and righting itself, including Elladan's boots. Sam gave Harry a grateful look and went back to cooking whatever it was that he had been trying to cook earlier. This time I will use my own pots and pans. Their pots are too heavy. Sam shot the twins a look of warning and set his smaller, hobbit-sized pot on the cooking fire. Anything I can help you with? Harry asked as he stepped up to the counter. Are you any good in the kitchen? Sam looked at the wizard skeptically. Harry couldn't help but laugh. Yes, I've been cooking since I was tall enough to reach the hob. Harry grabbed a potato and began peeling it with sure strokes. Sam watched before nodding his approval, and they started to work. The room was mostly bare, furnished with only a sturdy, long wooden table in the center and matching chairs surrounding it. The fortress was not known for creature comforts. It was a base of operations for Sauron's army, a gathering point for his minions, a stable for the Hellhawks and fell steeds, and a home for the Nazgoul. The Witch King had cleared all orcs from Minas Morgul before he allowed the other ringwraiths. The freedom to voice their opinions. It would not do for their grievances to be overheard by the wrong ears, especially the mouth. Armorazer sat on a hard, straight-backed chair and listened. Dwar argued relentlessly with Ren. Their voices were raised and reverberated in the room. Camul sat to Murazar's left. The Witch King watched as Camul clenched his fists in vexation. Murazar understood Camul's frustrations and finally raised his hand to silence the arguing pair. The Witch King spoke in the black speech. Enough! Gaining everyone's attention, Murazar waited for them to settle down in their seats. Rin was reluctant to comply, but finally sat as he was the last wraith standing. Ringwraith shook his head and, refusing to use the black speech, said, "The Master will free us. We need not fight amongst ourselves. If you prefer to continue following Sauron, then do so. But Ringwraith, enough." Murazar could see Ren growing angry again, so he cut across the beginning of yet another tirade. Opinions are of no import. Truths are, we are compelled by the will of the One Ring. Sauron rules over the ring. Therefore, he rules over us all. The Master has come to Middle-earth. The Master protected the halfling that carries the One Ring from my blade. That last fact had Ren out of his seat, ready to argue once again. Murazar held up his hand to stall his words. The Witch King simply said, "I saw the Master, he saw me. Those are the truths." Rin continued to stand at the opposite end of the table, refusing to cow to the Witch King. Carahel looked uneasy and asked, "Why would the Master do such a thing? What does this mean?" Reluctantly, Murazar admitted, "That is what vexes me." Camul frowned at the Witch King, saying, "I follow you, brother. You are the leader of the Nazgoul, but the Master's actions mean nothing. The Master has never mattered before. We are Sauron's generals. We have a duty to return the ring to him." Ren and Yuvatha both cried out in agreement, "Hear, hear." But their cheers were not repeated by all the ringwraiths gathered around the table. Murazar stood as the meeting was drawing to an end. He knew that before dawn bled next on Minas Morgul, there would be souls lost at the hand of the Witch King. Harry was crouching on a branch, looking southward down the pale gleam of Anduin. Beyond the river, the land appeared flat and empty, formless and vague. It was late evening once more, and the wizard felt a flicker of something, some sort of awareness of trouble or darkness that was lurking beyond the safety of the woods of Lothlorien. Alaed stood on a higher branch and turned his attention further south. Harry noticed the elf's intense look. Knowing an elf's vision, especially in the dark, was better than his. Harry asked, "What do you see?" There were a few silent moments that lingered between them, bringing his attention back to the wizard. Alaed shook his head as he said, "Nothing. It is not something I can see, but it is..." The elf's words tapered off, and Harry nodded in understanding. Voicing the words Alaed did not. "It is something you sense. I feel it too." "It's a darkness yet more," Alaed said, but didn't elaborate what more it could possibly be. The darkness, it feels like rage, hate, despair. Harry shook his head to clear it. He wasn't sure if he had explained it well, but Alaed appeared to understand. Harry looked once again towards the south. There was a dark haze in the night sky that loomed in one particular area. He had asked once what was out that way. Mordor. Something was stirring out there. Harry wasn't on guard duty that evening. He had simply needed a break from babysitting Pippin. Unfortunately, Harry wasn't finding much peace out by the river that night. Alia, on the other hand, was on guard duty and was soon moving on along the perimeter, leaving Harry to watch the river alone. There was a sudden clash of sound that reverberated through Harry, and he grasped the tree trunk as a wave of vertigo swept through him. Harry squeezed his eyes closed and felt anger, resentment, disappointment, pain, and betrayal wash over him. He gasped at the deep sorrow and leaned fully into the tree for support. Murazar slowly slid the mogul blade back and forth over the whetstone. It wasn't a necessary undertaking for him to do, since they had orcs to do menial tasks for them, but the Witch King found the methodical movement soothing. Dispatching Nazgoul wasn't easy. There wasn't much that could permanently kill a ringwraith. No mere man could do it, but another Nazgoul with a mogul blade, Akorahil, Giandor, and Dadonafel were straightening the hall. Hormarath and Dwar were moving the bodies to their bedrooms. The 9 were now down to 6. Camul, Ren, and Uvath had fought well, but were outskilled. Murazar wasn't their leader just because he was called the Witch King, and Murazar was also the best warrior among them. He hadn't wanted to slay his brothers, but there could be no dissension between them. The Master protected the Hobbit. He did not want Ermarizer to gain access to the One Ring. There had to be a reason, and Ermarizer would find out what it was before returning the ring to him. Dwarf silently laid the 3 rings on the table in front of the Witch King before backing away. Ermarizer didn't reach for them. He simply kept moving his sword with slow strokes. Hormarath re-entered the hall and looked at Ermarizer expectantly, but still the Witch King kept silent, sharpening his blade. Akorahil, Giandor, and Adunathal soon joined them. The 5 watched their leader until Hormarath spoke. Ren forced this outcome. He could not see reason. "It is done," said Ermarizer, as he openly glared at Hormarath. "You are too impatient. We have work to do. Answers to find. While searching for the One Ring, we could have found them, and then decided on an action. Perhaps our brothers would have seen reason when faced with the Master. Perhaps not. Now we cannot know, and their souls will forever be lost." At that reminder, 4 Nazgoul looked away in shame. But Hormarath would not be deterred. "The Master will free us, or condemn us for our actions on behalf of Sauron." Ermarizer countered. Harry wasn't sure how long he sat there on the branch before he finally dropped to the ground and made his way back to the center of Caras Galadon and the base of the main Maulern. It was late in the evening, and there weren't many awake at that hour. There was a glimmer of movement near the pavilion where the Fellowship currently resided. Harry sighed, wondering, not for the first time, what Pippin was up to, and went to check on things. With a nearly silent pop of displaced air, Harry apparated to the pavilion, and was surprised to find Galadriel walking away with Frodo following in her wake. Harry could hear snoring coming from the pavilion, and with a quick disillusion spell, chose to follow along. When Harry arrived at the small glade, he saw Galadriel lead Frodo to a low stone pedestal, carved like a branching tree, holding a shallow silver basin. When Harry had been led to that very bowl, he mistakenly thought it was a pensieve, but was quick to change his mind when he looked into it. Galadriel's mirror was more like a crystal ball with a bit of the mirror of Ariz mixed in. Galadriel asked, "Will you look into the mirror?" Frodo looked with apprehension at the silver basin. Instead of answering, Frodo asked a question of his own. "What will I see?" Harry shuddered at the memory of his own vision in the bowl. Galadriel poured water into the basin from a silver jug, and just like the last time Harry witnessed the action, a glow rose from the water. Cryptic like Dumbledore, Galadriel said, "Even the wisest cannot tell, for the mirror shows many things, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass." Frodo slowly stepped up to the pedestal and onto the stone step in order to see inside easier. The glow of the water lit Frodo's face clearly, and Harry knew that whatever the Hobbit saw was none of his business. Still, the little Hobbit looked so lost and alone when Frodo looked to Galadriel for guidance before he peered down into the glossy surface. Harry silently vowed to himself that he'd help Frodo carry out his quest as best he could, and popped back to his room, leaving the two alone in the small glen. Before anyone could ask anything further from him, Harry turned on the spot, and with a small pop of displaced air, was gone. Timeline. TA 3019, Jan 25, Gandalf slays the Balrog at the peak of Zurak Sigil and dies. TA 3019, Feb 14, Lothlorien, Frodo looks in the mirror of Galadriel, Gandalf returns to life. The evening of their last day in Lothlorien, the Galadrim held a grand parting feast in the Fellowship's honor. The elders then presented the members with gifts to help them on their journey. Lembas, elven cloaks with elven brooches, an elven rope for Sam, and boats for the Fanduin. Upon their return to the pavilion, the Fellowship began packing their belongings for their morning exodus. The wizard was once more on babysitting duty. Harry had pulled the hood of his cloak up, leaned back in his chair, and propped his feet up on the table with his ankles crossed. He then folded his arms over his chest to give the illusion of relaxing or perhaps even taking a nap, while he silently listened to the interaction between the hobbits. "Why take them with you, though?" Pippin asked. "Don't they just make your pack heavy?" Sam shrugged noncommittally and continued packing his belongings. The hobbit gently, reverently placed each pot and pan into his pack to keep them from denting or getting scratched, and stated, "They're mine. I've carried them this far. I'm taking them with me all the way to Mordor and back." Harry smirked under his hood. Pippin didn't know that Harry had already extended and lightened Sam's pack upon the hobbit's request. The two had had a conversation about what to bring the night before, and Harry had shown Sam his moleskin pouch. While making Sam's pack invisible was beyond Harry's abilities, enlarging the inside and lightening the load was something the wizard could help with, and did. Regardless of how much the hobbit put in his pack, it would still be lighter than Pippin's. But why? Pippin asked again in growing bemusement. You never know when they'll be needed. Sam gave Pippin a self-depreciating half-grin. After all, my frying pan came in handy down in Moria. Frodo pulled the straps of his pack closed and grinned at Sam's humor. Merry just sighed at Pippin while shaking his head. Why does it matter, Pip? If Sam wants to carry his whole kitchen around Middle-earth, what business is it of ours? It's not as if he's asking you to carry it for him. While the hobbits continued their banter, Legolas entered with Luna on his arm. As much as Harry would miss his sister, he was glad she wasn't joining them on this trip. Besides, the Fellowship wouldn't stay alone, according to the twins, because the Dunedain would be gathering soon and following them. There you are, Gwydior, Luna said. Everyone in the pavilion stopped what they were doing to hail Luna. She greeted them back, her charming smile brightly lighting her face. Luna had won over every member of the Fellowship, including the stubborn dwarf. Not only because she was always kind, but because Luna was one of the few elves that made a point to speak Western while around the Fellowship, purely out of politeness, since not all the members spoke Sindarin. Noneth was asking after you. Harry tipped his hood back to show his sister that he wasn't ignoring her. His feet hit the ground without sound, and Harry slowly stood with a stretch. I thought they were meeting us in the morning to see us off. Yes, they are, Luna said as she ruffled Harry's hair, and Naneth wants to see you now before the hour becomes too late. With a shooing motion, Luna sent him off. Now go. Legolas gave Harry a wry smile and repeated the first words the wizard had ever said to him. It is not polite to keep the lady waiting. Harry snorted in utter amusement. So, I have heard. Glador, Luna said in warning. Yes, Gwathel. Harry kissed her on the cheek, pulled a small bundle from his pocket to hand to Luna, and immediately apparated to his room. Harry removed his cloak and tossed it across the foot of his bed before exiting his room to find Galadriel and Celeborn in the sitting room. Galadriel was fussing over an array of objects lying on the table before her. Celeborn looked up when the wizard entered and smiled in relief. Good, you are here. Please tell your mother that the gifts she has chosen for the Fellowship are suitable. Ioneg, Galadriel paused in her fussing to turn her attention to Harry. Ioneg, hearing Galadriel refer to him as my son, always made Harry smile. Please tell your father that suitable is not sufficient enough. They need to be meaningful as well. Gifts? Harry asked as he moved into the room to stand by Galadriel's side. They were given gifts already. Yes, but those were from the people. Galadriel waved it off as unimportant. These are from me. Harry's smile broadened. Galadriel was a powerful elf, wise beyond measure, and revered by many, but deep down she was still a mother that loved to spoil those she cared for and looked after. Harry put a comforting arm around his mother's shoulder and reassured her, if it comes from you, whatever you present them will be treasured. What did you choose? Galadriel pointed each item out, one by one, and named who the item was for. The Thilasar and a sheath for Indudriel, for Aragorn. A golden belt for Boromir, a silver belt, each for Merry and Pippin. An elf stone, one that was only thought to be legend, 7, and a Galadriel bow strung with elf hair with arrows for Legolas. A small gray wooden box with a silver rune G for Galadriel. Inside the box was earth from Galadriel's orchard and a silver nut from a mullein tree, the last east of the sea and west of the mountains. This was for Sam, 3 strands of Galadriel's hair for Gimli. That news gave Harry a startled chuckle, and the file of Galadriel for Frodo. Harry listened and nodded, and agreed with all but one. Harry protested when Galadriel started with, and for you, I have no need for another gift. You both have given me so much already. Celeborn raised a hand to stop any further protest from Harry. The wizard's mouth snapped closed, and he deflated. Galadriel saw the turmoil on the boy's face and pulled him into an embrace. Her voice was soft and soothing as she explained, We understand that you are not accustomed to receiving gifts. Each time we have gifted you anything, even your clothing, you have tried to object. Harry would have argued that point, but she was right. When Galadriel released her hold on him, Harry nodded acquiescence. He looked at the small wooden box, somewhat similar to the one awaiting Sam's acceptance, that sat innocently on the table. Harry looked at his parents and saw nothing but acceptance and love. Celeborn gave him a small nod of encouragement, and Galadriel pushed the box towards him. Harry felt butterflies in his stomach as he ran a finger over the golden rune before he flipped the lid open. Cushioned inside the box was a silver pendant on a silver chain, and Harry's grin grew. The pendant's design was reminiscent of Luna's crown. Galadriel drew the chain out of the box and clasped it around Harry's neck. This is the sigil of Lothlorien. We want you to remember that you have a home with us. Once this war is through, you are welcome to remain with us, your family. Can't yell, Harry stood there, stroking the sigil lovingly, and tried to calm the sensations battling within him. His voice cracked with emotion when he replied, "I will treasure it always." Harry cleared his throat. "I have something for you as well." The wizard pulled the moleskin pouch from his neck and opened it. From within, he pulled a small bundle and handed it to his mother. "Luna helped me create these." Galadriel opened the cloth and stared at the small, intricate mirror. "It is lovely." Harry chuckled. "Say my name into the mirror." "Harry," Galadriel spoke clearly and gasped when she suddenly saw Luna on the other side. "Lunovo?" Luna smiled at her mother. "Yes, in math." "How?" "Magic," Luna said triumphantly. Harry laughed. "Yes, magic. These are joined two-way mirrors." Celeborn perked up at the mention of the mirrors. "I have heard of these in your world. You two managed to get him to work?" Luna laughed. "We can discuss the runes in more details later. LOTR." Harry explained to Galadriel, "Luna has mine, so we could demonstrate them for you, and this one will stay here with you. If you have a need of me, you only have to say my name, and I will answer when it is safe to do so." "It is perfect," Galadriel said, while reverently drawing her fingers lightly over the mirror with wonder. "You were brought here to fulfill a prophecy. You came here to conquer a dark lord and bring peace to the world. Yet you have already managed to do so much more." The lady then looked to her son and mimicked her movements with the mirror and lovingly caressed Harry's cheek. "You have brought my family back safely to me, bestowing peace and hope to my heart." Dawn broke, and the fellowship gathered at the dock. 4 boats awaited them, and as the men began loading their belongings aboard the vessels, Galadriel came to bestow her last gifts. Boromar bowed, thanked the lady, and then proceeded to absently put packs into the boat he'd row. Pippin was grinning, and Merry was blushing and thanking the lady for her kindness. Sam was momentarily struck dumb. The hobbit had tears of gratitude sparkling in his eyes when he promised not only to look after his gift, but to find the perfect place for it. Frodo was bewildered and stroked the glass with awe, but Harry enjoyed watching the most stoic members of the Fellowship be emotionally compromised by the thoughtful gifts. After all, elf stones were rare, and being welcomed into the family on such a grand scale was overwhelming. But Aragorn and Legolas weren't nearly as entertaining to watch as Gimli had been. The dwarf blustered and gaped like a fish out of water. He kept looking at his gift, then back to the lady in awe and reverence. Harry thought for a moment that Gimli would fall to his knees and profess his undying devotion to the woman, but the bristly dwarf pulled himself together and bowed stiffly with a gruff thanks, then ruined his entire exit by nearly falling off the dock and into the river rather than the boat. Chuckling, Harry turned to his family and all amusement left him. He stepped up to Celeborn and clasped forearms with the man. "Thank you for accepting me into the family and making my transition to Middle-earth so welcoming." Celeborn smiled at the boy and pulled him into a brisk, one-armed embrace, patted him on the back before whispering to him, "You will do well out there. Remember, unlike the last time, no one expects you to do this alone." Celeborn pulled back enough to give Harry a reassuring smile. "This is war. Times will be difficult, and as they have already experienced, not everyone will survive. But in the end, you will succeed. I will do my best to remember that." Harry turned to Galadriel and didn't hide his amusement when she kissed his forehead. Galadriel gave Harry a sad smile when she told him, "I will miss you around here, but we have your gift, and we'll use it often." "Nith," Luna said in amused exasperation. "It is meant for emergencies." Galadriel scoffed. "It is my gift to use as I see fit." "Net." Harry laughed and pulled his sister into a hug. Why do you bother trying to argue with her? You cannot win. Luna sighed and pushed Harry away. Go, or I will be forced to go with you, because seeing you leave brings my heart sadness. He turned to leave, but came up short when confronted by the Lothlorien guards, Haldir leading the way, as always. Harry knew each of them and was surprised to see they weren't on duty. Haldir frowned at Harry before his face cleared of all emotions. You were the worst guard I ever had, the misfortune of training. A small grin graced his features to lighten Haldir's words, but you learned and became a decent warrior. Be well. Make Lothlorien proud. It was an honor learning from you and serving the guards, Harry admitted and clasped forearms with Haldir. He gave a nod to the guards, who all nodded back, and finally got into the last boat left at the dock. He was only marginally surprised to see Pippin in his boat. Who did I upset to have babysitting duties again? Pippin blinked in confusion and pointed at Luna. Lady Luna said you asked for me to ride with you. The last thing the Fellowship heard from the docks was Luna's laughter. Harry just shook his head in defeat and paddled hard to take their boat to the center of the river, where the other 3 boats already were. The first boat was Boromir with Merry and Sam, second was Legolas with Gimli, and the third was Aragorn and Frodo. Pippin got comfortable in the boat, laid his head back, and closed his eyes. Before long, Pippin opened his eyes and asked, "Why don't you just use magic to move the boat?" I suppose I could, but using magic isn't always the answer. Harry kept his strokes even. There are some in my world that use magic so often they become lazy, and their magic becomes stunted. Stunted? Pippin looked at Harry skeptically. Harry just nodded. Stunted. They don't do things for themselves, don't use their muscles, aren't nearly as strong as they once were, and lose stamina. That's one way that their magic grows weak. And just admit it, Pippin relaxed, closing his eyes again. You don't know how to do it. Stunned with affronted amusement, Harry stared at the lazy hobbit and then splashed the little scallywag. Pippin jumped when the cold water hit him and nearly fell overboard, causing Harry to laugh until his eyes watered from mirth. The boats traveled smoothly down the Anduin. The Fellowship only pulled onto the shore for quick breaks, and when the nights became too dark and too treacherous to travel, Harry felt a niggling of concern. There hadn't been an ambush. No sign of orcs or goblins. Legolas kept looking at the western shore with troubled eyes, but when questioned, the elf had no answer for his own unease. It had been 7 days since they left Lothlorien, and they were past due for trouble. Harry refused to voice that, as that would jinx their good luck thus far. Still, Kermarazar walked into the room and called out, "There is movement on the Great River." The ringwraiths had all stilled the moment Kermarazar came through the door. Kermarazar looked over the remaining Nazgoul and snapped out, "Aduna fell." Adunafell's back snapped straight at the sound of his name. Kermarazar ordered, "Fly out and see what is there." With all of the previous talk regarding the Master being in Middle-earth, Adunafell hesitated only for a moment and looked to his brothers before nodding his understanding. Right away, make haste, Acorahel warned. There are orcs in the area. If they anger the Master...
Acorahel Ermorazor spoke. Adunafell will carry out his orders. The or else was left unsaid, but the threat was felt as Adunafell nodded and fled from the building.
The remaining Nazgoul followed Adunafell out of the room, though they did not follow him to the stables. Instead, they ascended the stairs to the parapet of the inner curtain wall. 5 Nazgoul stood watching as Adunafell flew away on his hellbeast. The eye was upon them, so they remained silent. It wasn't until the fell beast was but a speck in the distant sky that the eye lost interest and turned in another direction. Only then did Hormarath speak softly. "I am the best flyer." "You are," Merizor agreed. "The Master is there." "I imagine he is." Merizor agreed again. "And yet you didn't send me," Hormarath stated. No, he hadn't. Merizor knew Hormarath was excited about the prospect of being released from their current hell. While Hormarath was an excellent flyer, he would most likely not carry out his task properly. Worse, Hormarath could endanger the Master in his haste, bringing his attention to the river. The Witch King didn't verbally react to Hormarath's words, but he dropped his gaze from the horizon to look at lands before them. Minas Morgul was once beautiful and teeming with life, but that was when it was Minas Ithil. Now Minas Morgul was filled with death, decay, and a choking miasma that lent a green tint to the evening air. Hormarath apparently wasn't finished speaking. You sent Adunafel to his death. Those words were spoken bluntly, quite matter-of-factly, with no accusation within them. That took our Immerser by surprise. Silence was met by that last statement, until the Witch King finally admitted, possibly. They were nearing the rapids when Legolas called out, "Archers! Hobbits, down!" Aragorn commanded. In each boat, the hobbits hunkered down to be as small a target as possible. Warriors plucked up their bows, and Harry opted for his wand. Legolas, Boromir, and Aragorn were steadily shooting orcs while the enemy's arrows were flying in their direction, but not a single one could penetrate Harry's shimmering magical shield. While arrows flew to and from the shore, a weird flying lizard-looking creature let out a piercing scream, announcing the arrival of a Nazgoul. Pippin cowered in fear. The flying lizard hovered near the water's edge. Harry watched the Nazgoul sit upon his steed and stare in his direction. Only the Nazgoul did not attack, nor did he direct the orcs to do so. The wizard found the turn of events fascinating. That was the second time a Nazgoul simply stared at him. Legolas took advantage of the distraction and shot at the lizard, killing the beast. The Nazgoul fell from the sky, and Harry was unnerved to the point that he dropped the shield and began paddling as fast as he could towards the shoreline. Harry... The wizard was so focused that he didn't hear the calls of his fellow travelers and was soon at the shore. Harry didn't know what compelled him to react the way he had, but he was soon hopping out of the boat, wand in hand, and batting away any stray arrows that dared come his way. Soon Harry stood beside the fallen form. With the Nazgoul kneeling at his feet, Harry roared at the remaining orcs. Bombarda. The spell killed the few remaining orcs and left a small crater in the ground. Harry dropped his gaze and looked at the wretched creature that cowered before him. The rest of the Fellowship had come ashore and were cautiously coming up behind him. Gimli gripped his axe while suggesting, "You might want to come away from there, lad." The Nazgul's head snapped in the direction of the approaching Fellowship, bringing them to a standstill. Boromir asked, "Why is he not attacking? It makes no sense." It was Harry that responded, "He won't hurt me. Since you're with me, he won't hurt you so long as you don't attack first." The Nazgul keened and slowly raised his left trembling hand towards Harry. That's when the young wizard saw something glimmering on the Nazgul's finger. The ring. The Nazgoul nodded silently, and Harry continued puzzling out what the Nazgoul was trying to silently communicate. "You want me to take your ring?" The Nazgoul nodded again. Aragorn stepped closer to explain. "He's a Nazgoul, Harry. A ringwraith. Without his ring..." The Nazgoul looked at Aragorn and then at Harry. Harry saw past the shadows of the Nazgul's hood to the pleading man within the ragged robe and nodded in understanding. The young wizard crouched in front of the Nazgoul. Harry spoke softly when he asked, "If I take your ring, will it release you?" Keening, the ringwraith, nodded. Harry nodded along. "Then I will take your ring." There was another keening sound from the Nazgoul, and Harry gave the ringwraith a sympathetic smile. "What is your name?" "I was once named Adunafel," the Nazgoul whispered in a cracked, husky voice filled with emotions. Harry put his hand over the ring and gritted his teeth at the impact touching the ring had on him. Harry told the Nazgoul, "You will be free to rest at last, Adunafel." "Thank you, master," Adunafel said as the ring slipped from his finger and into Harry's palm. Adunafel stiffened and then sighed with relief. The sigh was followed by a small gust of wind that flattened the Nazgul's ragged garments to the rocks at their feet before those too decayed into dust. The wizard stared at the ring for a moment before dropping it into his mokeskin pouch out of sight. "What just happened?" Merry asked. Harry looked past Merry to Frodo. Frodo gripped the one ring that still hung around his neck and looked at Harry with wide, frightened eyes. Instead of answering the questions, Harry pushed to his feet, saying, "We need to keep moving. This area isn't safe." "Aye, that's true," Gimli agreed, but wasn't going to let the subject drop that easily. "But we need answers too." Later, Aragorn ordered, when we made camp on the other side of the rapids. By the time they had set up camp near the shore, evening had come. Harry put up wards to protect them and warn them of any approaching enemies. The Fellowship were staring at the wizard, and he put his wand away before he began his tale. "My name is Harry Potter. As I mentioned when we first met, I'm not from Middle-earth. I'm from another realm, simply called Earth. Harry watched each of them for their reactions, and was amused to see that Pippin looked eager to hear what he had to say, as if he was prepared for a good bedtime story. Unfortunately, Pippin was the only one. The rest looked concerned, so Harry conjured chairs for everyone and sat down ready to tell what he needed to, so they'd understand. I was born a wizard. In my world, that was a rare thing. Not as rare as I hear your wizards are. We have many more than 5 of them. Sorry, 4. Harry corrected himself, but continued. There was a prophecy. I was destined to rid the wizarding world of a dark lord. The prophecy was told before I was born, and it took me until I was 17 to finally accomplish it. A lot happened during that time. One of those things is the Deathly Hallows. Harry pulled the moleskin pouch from his neck. What I'm about to tell you is only known by my family here in Middle-earth, or so I thought. Apparently the Nazgoul are aware of who I am. Who are you? Pippin asked, still wide-eyed and eager to hear more. Unlike the others, he sat in one of the chairs Harry had provided. Harry looked at the others, and they, too, slowly sat down. I have a number of titles, but the one that's important for this part of my tale is the Master of Death. Really, Pippin squeaked, barely containing his fascination. Yes, really. Harry shook his head at the excitable hobbit. There's a bit of a story that explains the title and how it came to be. It was turned into a children's tale, but like most legends, they are based on truth, and as far-fetched as this story may seem, it too is based upon truth. So, taking a quick breath, Harry dived into telling the tale. Long ago, there were 3 brothers that came upon a river. There wasn't a safe way across, so using their magic, they made a bridge, and were safely to the other side. How big was the river? That would have to be a very big bridge, Merry said in awe, but the moment he realized he had spoken, the hobbit blushed. Harry just grinned at him before explaining, it's never stated in the story just how wide the river is, but it is mentioned that prior to the bridge being built, the river had claimed many lives. Anyhow, Death was not pleased at being cheated out of their souls, but he was very cunning. Instead of attacking them, he praised them for being so clever. Then he offered them prizes for beating him. The first brother, Antioch, wanted a wand that could not be defeated. At that, Harry pulled out Dumbledore's wand with a flick of his wrist and held it up for them all to see. As he continued the tale, Harry conjured a small table and Hermione's favorite bluebell flames. Death snapped a thin branch from a nearby elder tree, swiped his hand over it in a grand gesture before presenting Antioch with the elder wand. Antioch went to town, boasted about the wand and how he was now the most powerful wizard alive. Naturally, word got around, which led to someone killing him in his sleep days later and stealing it. 1 brother down. Harry set the wand down on the table and summoned the second Hallow from the pouch. As he continued speaking, the second brother, Cadmus, was heartbroken. You see, before that trip across the river, he was supposed to get married, but his beloved died days before the wedding, and he missed her. Cadmus requested a way to bring her back. Death took a smooth stone from the river, once more gestured over the gift, and gave him the resurrection stone. Harry set the stone upon the table beside the wand. Cadmus was so happy that he ran home, used the stone, and was joined by his fiancée, but she was miserable because she no longer belonged among the living. Distraught, Cadmus released her and killed himself in order to join her. 2 brothers down. The third brother, Ignotus, Harry pulled out his cloak, set aside his moleskin bag, and sat the cloak on his lap, running his hand along the familiar, smooth material, was the more clever of the 3, or at the very least, the more suspicious of Death's motives. Ignotus asked for a way to hide from Death. Death paused at that request, before tearing his very own cloak. He brushed his hand over the cloth and created the third gift. Ignotus was given an invisibility cloak. That brother hid until he was an old man. Before he passed away, he gave his cloak to his son and met Death as a friend. This cloak became a family heirloom and has been passed down from generation to generation. I am a direct descendant of Ignotus Peverell, last in a very long, diluted family line. I am the sole owner of the 3 Deathly Hallows. I inherited 2 and won 1. The one who owns all 3 Deathly Hallows is proclaimed the Master of Death, and apparently that title transferred to this realm. Death is death, regardless of where you live. Pippin was up out of his seat like a shot. That's an invisibility cloak. Harry snorted and handed the hobbit the cloak. Don't go far. Harry quickly grabbed his wand and shot a spell at Pippin. Hey, Pippin cried out in surprise. What was that? A tracking charm, just in case you get a crazy idea in that head of yours and try to hide from us, Harry explained. We don't want you getting lost. Harry frowned. Be careful with that. It's been in my family ever since death gave it to my ancestor. Everyone watched as Pippin allowed the shimmering cloth to flow around him and gasped. Well, Harry didn't gasp since he knew what was coming, when Pippin's body vanished, leaving his head to appear as if it were floating. Soon the 4 hobbits were all taking turns hiding under the cloak, and Harry kept a close eye on them, courtesy of his tracking charms on each of them. Aragorn sat forward as the hobbits played around. You freed the Nazgoul, so he's gone. Permanently. Yes, Harry shrugged. I wasn't sure why, but there was a weird pull to him. He was one of mine, Harry sighed. That sounds so odd. Wraiths aren't living. Not really. They belong to death. And as the MOD, asked Boromir, Master of Death. As Maud, it is my responsibility to return the Nazgul to death. I don't control death. I can't stop someone from dying. That's not what it's meant to be, Maud. I help keep the balance of life. Idunafel wanted to die to be released. He didn't fight me at all. He willingly offered up his ring and everything. The one who stabbed Frodo. The Witch King, Frodo said, suddenly sitting next to Harry. He dropped his blade and backed into the fire when he saw you with me. Harry smiled at the tired hobbit. Yes, him. I think that my status as Maud stopped him too. You do that with all ghosts? Pippin's head suddenly popped up beside Gimli, and Harry chuckled to see the dwarf had nearly fallen off his chair in surprise. No, Harry corrected. Wraiths aren't like ghosts. They are an abomination, whereas a ghost is simply a spirit that has unfinished business to attend to or is afraid to cross over. Once their business is resolved, they can rest if they choose to. The bigger question here is if your status as Maud will be beneficial or hamper our chances of getting through this. Aragorn stated, Harry thought about it for a moment before giving his opinion. I doubt it will be much of a problem. The living, with a few exceptions, don't know my status, nor do they need to. Only the dead, or undead, will know. That includes Sauron, Legolas reminded them. That includes Sauron, Harry agreed. The difference is none of the Nazgul know where I will pop up until they come face to face with me. I'm willing to wager it is the same for Sauron. You have one of their rings, Gimli reminded the wizard. I do. Harry agreed again. Only he can't see it in my moleskin pouch. Harry held up the pouch and then put it around his neck where it disappeared against his skin. It's made from a magical beast from my world and not enchanted, so the effect will never wear off. Pippin's head suddenly appeared behind Boromir. Does that mean the enchantment on this cloak will someday wear off? Boromir did his best not to flinch, but his hand twitching towards his hilt was a telltale sign of his nervousness. Harry motioned Pippin over and took the cloak back and began folding it carefully. No, it's not man-made. Man-made items have the unfortunate side effect of losing potency. As I said, this was a gift from death. Harry placed it back in his pouch and then stood, turning to face the presence that remained hidden at the edge of the woods. Harry? Aragorn asked. It's okay, Harry responded, but he wasn't talking to Aragorn. You can come out now. Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, and Aragorn were suddenly armed and standing beside him. Harry put his hand up and told them, it's okay, no one is going to harm anyone. A ghostly figure, giving off a slight green hue, drifted forward hesitantly. Harry smiled at him and motioned him closer. Harry stepped forward, ignoring the hissing warnings behind him. The ghost looked from Harry to the others and back, finally stepped closer and dropped to a knee with a hand to his chest. His voice was hoarse as he said, Master, I am Aethelfrid, emissary to King Morthic, the king of the mountain. Morthegroen, king of the Oathbreakers, Aragorn said softly, garnering him a glaring hiss from Aethelfred. Much as he had with Idunafal, Harry crouched and spoke with Aethelfred. Why are you here, Aethelfred? Aethelfred tore his gaze from Aragorn and told Harry, many years have we dwelt within the mountain pass. Cursed, we cannot find peace. We felt your arrival. I was sent out to find you. You broke your oath. There will be no peace until it is fulfilled. Aragorn spouted. Harry ignored Aragorn's outburst, speaking to Aethelfred. I've been in Middle-earth for a while now. How is it you only found me now? Your presence was only whispers in the wind. It wasn't until you used your death magic to release the Nazgoul that I could find you. And you want me to, what? Harry asked. Release you, your king, and the other Oathbreakers from your curse. Wincing, Frid tried to reason. The line is broken. Master, there is no one we can seek to release us from the curse. No one but you. Ah, but there is another. The line of Isildur is not broken. Timeline. TI 3019, Feb 17, Whitehair transports Gandalf to Lorien. TI 3019, Feb 23. Boats are attacked by night close to Sarn, Geber.